replicate what you saw there.
How do they describe them?
They describe them as weapons that once released can't be revolted or can't be turned back, and that they will obliterate any area, any city. And they say that one of the weapons can destroy any man on 3 worlds. Crazy stuff. This is where Oppenheimer got his famous quote when he obviously tested the nuke, right? Now I have become death, destroyer of worlds. He got that from the Mahabharata.
Yeah. What a great quote.
Oh, man, crazy.
What a great quote. Yeah. So the idea is that there were beings that were having wars on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
Were they? Do you believe they were having wars with people that were revolting, or were they having wars with other beings?
They were fighting with each other. And evidence of these wars can be found in the book of Deuteronomy in the modern day Bible. These gods, I didn't mean God with an S, because everywhere in the Bible where it says God singular, it's actually a mistranslation. The actual, if you backwards look up the translation in Arabic and then down to Aramaic and everything else, you find out it's gods plural. They were fighting each other over resources and people and control of the planet. And so that's why in the book of Deuteronomy, God tells people, go to this city, and it's like a far city where they don't even know that these people exist. They go over there to kill them. He says, kill the women, kill the children, and bring the spoils of war back to me. And you see these wars in the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Sumerian tablets. And these wars are just nonstop, the Indian Vedas. And it's always about attacking another city, and even talk about Trojan horse methods to get behind the gates, and then to utilize that to attack and kill and bring back these spoils, which is pretty crazy stuff. It's like they were attacking each other. They had gone awry. They had gone rogue out here on this planet, and then began to fight over people and populations and resources.
Roger, let me ask you a question. How do you use the DNA? I'm not talking about life. I'm talking the DNA of India. Who is India to you?
I can't even answer the question. I don't have an impression. I've never been there.
I guess what I'm asking for, did they just pass up China in total population? I think I just saw a report a couple weeks ago. Either they're there or they're about to pass up China, because the average age in India right now is 27. The average age in China is 38, 40. I mean, China's getting older and India's getting younger because India doesn't have a one-child family policy. India's like, keep making babies. Right? And China's now realizing we made a big mistake. We kind of need the younger generation to lead in innovation. So India, Apple is now moving a lot of its manufacturing, chips, all of that to India gradually without offending China, because China could fully disrupt Apple's business if they turn on Tim Cook. So Tim Cook's, I believe Tim Cook is doing it very subtly. He said, no, China, we're still going to make chips with you. We're just moving 25%. No, China, we're going to make chips with you. We're just moving 50%. If China all of a sudden thinks that they know he's going to move 100% away from China, I think China's going to make a disruption. But here's what I'm going with this. So the U.S. companies are sitting there saying, where can we build the things that we need to do? Biden's speech, he talked about how the U.S. used to make 40% of the chips, now we make 10%. We saw a statistic a couple of years ago during COVID that used car prices doubled all of a sudden because China was producing 80% of the chips. Now Asia was producing 80% of the chips. I think it was China, Indonesia. I think it was like a few countries that was 80%. If you remember that statistic, right? We've all seen that. So now the fear is, if we go into bed with India, what is the history with India? And again, I'm not asking because you said I don't have a thought on it. I wonder what. So for example, a carrier, insurance carrier I used to do business with, a big company, you know, very big company. They approached us, we signed a contract. Okay? We go to their city, they invite us down, I meet all the executives, all the C-suites. It's a great experience, we can do a lot of business. Direct competitor has a meeting. In their meeting, they tell them, if you don't drop your contract with them, we won't do business with you. Those guys will take advantage, okay? The following Monday, a big player comes to us from that company, the one that we signed a contract with. They fly out with their lawyers. And they said, we need to meet with you with our lawyers. The only time insurance carriers come and meet with the CEO with lawyers is because they're terminating the contract. So I say, no problem. Let's go to my office. So we go into my office. I'm sitting there with my chief compliance officer, Mike, and a couple other guys. And you see this guy says, we're here to terminate the contract. I said, what's your cause? We just don't think this relationship's going anywhere. I'm like, very weird. You have to have like placement isn't good or this isn't good. In this case, we had it where our placement wasn't good and we lost the contract. In this one, we didn't have. So I said, but I want to hear a reason. Now I know the reason. Because I heard your CEO gave a speech, and that speech, the guy that was in the room came to our foot. What's your call? Told me, he says, hey, just so you know, we just don't think this relationship speech is very you have to have, so you don't have a reason for it. No, in this case, we had to go to that guy, his terminated contract. So I said, but I want to hear a reason. The guy off his boss just reached out and gave him that speech. The guy that was in session to I decided what I want to do is we just got to protect the relationship in the right up, you don't have to say it's to make sure you can't suddenly terminate that guy. You got to give him what do you call it? Run rate before you do, right? The only concern I have is if America locks on with another nation, we are number one provider of chips or technology resources. We have to be careful not to strengthen India in such a way that years later they become the next China 7.0 and it's 2035 and now India is only in America the same shit. We created the next monster. So the only goal that I have is think about America construction another nation and what U.S. has done with China by that shit. How different an approach would we take with a country like India? We have to strengthen another country that's okay. Years later,
well, I think it will require having a president who says, perhaps we shouldn't be making our chips outside the United States. Perhaps we shouldn't be making our most important pharmaceutical drugs outside the United States. It's the best way to control these industries and to provide economic opportunities for Americans to build these things here. So why are we outsourcing them? Oh, because the labor there is cheaper. I think yes, but the national security implications perhaps shouldn't add to that. Countries like China, are systematically buying up all the natural minerals, like cobalt, things that we need to build chips and to build other technologies. I think this is where the policy works first, and returning these national security sensitive industries back to the United States is absolutely right. So my short answer is, I wouldn't be making the chips in China or in Italy. I'd be making China build chips and brought to American technologies. I think
we should let Toyota in. So this is when, if you remember Milton Friedman's old videos, when Toyota came into America, hey, let's let them compete. What did Toyota force Ford and other companies to do? Make cheaper cars and improve, because Toyota was producing a good car for middle America. So we helped Toyota blow up into what Toyota became, because if U.S. sells Toyota, guess what? Other people sell it as well. So we allowed BMW, we allowed Mercedes, we allowed all these other guys to compete against the other car makers. Who won? Realistically, the U.S. citizens won, because we forced Ford and a lot of other guys to compete to produce a better car. Fine.
But we didn't stop making Fords and Chevys in the United States.
Exactly.
We didn't stop making them.
But here's kind of where I'm going with that. I agree. Today, I have 10 engineers in my office in Dallas, but I also have 10 in India, okay? The engineers I pay here, let's just kind of throw a number out there. If they're 150 here, they're 50 in India. So what they'll do is these technology consulting firms will come to you and they'll say, we can do the same work for you, but you have to pay 150. With us, you only pay $100,000 a year for these guys. So they take the split between the salary they pay them, which is a 50-50. They keep the 50. They have to deal with the HR, and they get the project done. So, hey, the next sprint is going to require 293 hours for this upgrade. It's going to cost you this much. The next sprint, and anyways, we do the math with that. So as long as labor is going to be cheaper in India, in other places, the capitalist is going to find a way to save money by using those resources. Because for Apple to build an iPhone chip in India versus America, Roger, the numbers, the person's going to say, oh, you want to buy an iPhone and build it in America? No problem. It's $2,500. I don't want to pay. That's crazy. Exactly. Because the labor is expensive here. But the labor is cheap in India. So, and then the alternative is to say what? Well, you can't build it anyway. It's got to be in America. Then the average American takes a hit. I can't afford to buy this. So it's a very much of a tight, cyclical cycle that we're all need. This is why China knows America needs China right now. We can't step away from them dramatically. All I'm saying is we're leaving China. That resignation from China is coming. May take 5 years, may take 10 years, may take 15 years. It's coming, okay? When it does, we have to deploy it elsewhere for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. One of those places is going to be India. How do we do that to make sure when we give all this business to India, they don't all of a sudden become the next enemy we're dealing with 10, 20 years from now? That's the question.
So I think kind of to go back off of what Roger mentioned earlier, that Nixon wasn't necessarily the one that caused China to become China what it is. I think there's a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think the biggest thing that we've learned here is that China can take everything that we have, but we can't send what we have to China. So as long as India doesn't just close off to itself where it says, okay, we're going to now take your Facebook and we're going to call it India Facebook, or we're going to take your this and we're going to call it this. Then as long as you have some where there's a big open where not only is America itself a market for consumption, but also we produce and we sell things to Europe and all the other places, where China is they produce for themselves and then they produce for the rest of the world. So as long as you're able to have it go both ways, then I don't think there's as much of worry of that as what we face with China, where even if you invest in China, you can't take the money out. If you do, all the limitations are on the way out.
And that's where I'm going.
Yes.
And that's where I'm going. Then I think the structure on how we broker that deal
needs to be in place.
Before we deploy all this business to them, let's put a deal together.
Yes.
Here's what the deal has to be.
So there's a really interesting thing actually that they did in Norway was when in December 23rd, 1969, I'm pretty sure, when they found oil in Norway. What they did was that American companies had gone into a lot of other countries and basically just done private, bought the land, brokered a deal, had the resources, and then funneled the money out more or less, right? But in Norway, what they did was they set up a structure in terms of, like you're saying, a deal of who's responsible, who gets what, right? So in this case, there was a lot of help and assistance from America where obviously ConocoPhillips, Shell, a lot of these companies made a lot of money, Exxon, you name it. But at the same time, they also helped educate the Norwegian engineers so that over time they'd learn how to do it. And the deals and the licenses were set up in a way where Norway as a country also benefited vastly from the resources, as well as the private companies that came in to develop and help essentially get the oil out of the ground.
So, Pat, what would you put in a contract like that? What you know about stuff like this? What type of ironclad stipulations would you put in so something like a China doesn't come about where it says it's not too aggressive on our side, but make sure that this doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, here's how I look at these things. I don't know is the number one answer because I need to see the deals. But if I'm selling my company to his private equity firm, okay, and they're coming in, or if I'm selling 20% to him, 50% to him, 55% to him, or 100% to him, right? You're going to have 20 different deals that you're negotiating, okay, 20 different markers you're negotiating. Board seats, he wants 3 out of 5. Hell no. You get 1 out of 5 because if he's got 3 out of 5, they can fire me. Okay. Well, I don't care about 3 out of 5 because he's buying 60% anyway. So who are you to say, no, he can't have 3 out of 5? How about we make 4 out of 7? I get 3, you get 4. I still have those 3 in there. Let's not make it 5. Let's extend it to 7. Okay, I don't care. I'm still fully in control. All right. There's the price. There's a dollar. There's my commitment afterwards. There's a non-compete. How long do you want me to not compete? If I'm selling the company to you, do you have a 2-year non-compete, 5-year non-compete, 10-year non-compete? There's 20 things that you negotiate, right? First thing I would do is I would go to the guys that have done the deals with all these other countries and say, what are the 20 points? Let's put them all out. And I'm going to tell me the history of the deals where we won the most. Tell me the deals that we had where they won the most and why. So China won 90% to the point of us winning. They won a lot, and we gave them way too much control. COVID exposed the hell out of how much U.S. relied on China to even make the shots, the vaccine. All this, it was just a very ridiculous thing that COVID exposed on how much China. Once you get those things, then you sit there and say, hey, India, here's what we're willing to do. If not, guess what you do? Well, whether you do it or not, we're going to let Apple produce the stuff here. Really? No problem. Anything Apple sells that's made in India, it's going to be a 25% tax on Apple. Go ahead. Yeah. So forget about putting it on you. We're going to put it on Apple so they can't come to India. Oh, you can't do that. That's our number one customer. No shit, it's your number one customer, but they're out of America. Mm. So let's have this okay, America, I understand what you're saying. Of course you understand what I'm saying. Let's do a deal where long-term you understand we brought this business to you.
Wait a minute, Pat. Who wrote your remarks? Was it Donald Trump?
I was gonna say Pat 2024.
Yeah. No, but by the way, that's what was attractive about him doing the deals with the people that he did. Do you know who speaks like that? Do you know who speaks like that? Who speaks like that? Operators. A person who runs a company, a person who operates a military, a person who operates a team, a person who's in it that's dirty, ugly, nasty. Not a politician. They don't speak like that because politicians I got you a deal. Yeah. I got you a deal. Don't worry about it. I'll see at the country.
What he always used to say is that the other countries send killers to the negotiating table. We send social workers.
Yeah, you're right.
And this goes all the way back to 1988 where he's saying, wait a minute, I'm for free trade, but I'm also for fair trade. Your markets have to be open to our products as well as vice versa. And this is also why he opposed these one-size-fits-all trade agreements in favor of doing an individual deal with Germany and a different individual deal with France and an individual deal with any nation, which makes a lot more sense rather than this one-size-fits-all TPP and so on. So I think it's about reciprocal rights. I mean, you would not want to put yourself in a situation vis-a-vis, say, India, where we're moving jobs and business there, but their markets are closed to our goods and services.
Roger, I've been in the financial business for 20 years. There's insurance companies who go to on their floors, all the engineers. I'm not going to name them, but I've been to most of them. I say, yeah, well, we got 300 engineers here. Really? Yeah, where do you recruit them from? MIT? Nope, IIT. IIT? Yeah. What's IIT? Where's IIT based out of? India. IIT is officially a better school at producing engineers than MIT. I don't know if you've ever seen this exercise they did. It's pretty epic. They take a battery, a wire, and all these basic things, and they go to an MIT Institute graduate, and they say, hey, here, put this together. They're like, I don't know how to do this. Then they go and do the same thing at an IIT Institute graduate. Here, put this. Oh, this is easy. We'll learn this in our first year. And they put it together. And then they said, as good as MIT is, IIT is passing these guys up. I spoke at their university in Mumbai. I don't know what year it was. 5,000 people were in the audience, and you can see the hunger in these guys' eyes. And they're all about technology, innovation, all of that. So I think these guys are going to be the next China. They're a little bit more reasonable. They're a little bit easier to deal with. They also have a history of issues and problems. Their enemy is Pakistan and a few other guys, neighboring people that they have. Anytime a company, you would much rather negotiate with a company when it's worth $1 billion than when it's worth $100 billion. I think U.S. has to start negotiating now before it's too late and they say, no, we don't want to negotiate with you. That's all.
I'm just enamored with cats, especially tigers. I just think nature created like the most beautiful, terrifying thing. I mean, if a tiger wasn't real, it's right out of Avatar. I mean, with their insane colorations and their fangs and the way they can leap, their capabilities. I'm sure you've seen that video of the guy who's on the elephant and the tiger leaps through the grass and gets him while he's on the elephant. You ever seen that?
No.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. Because this guy is in India and he's on this elephant and he's riding this elephant and you see the grass move ahead of him and this tiger leaps like 15 feet in the air and slashes at this guy, and he's just lucky he got out of it with just getting cut up.
Oh my
Watch
God,
this.
That is a nightmare.
So the guy's on the elephant. Look at this cat.
Oh my God.
Look how it leaps. I mean, look at the size of this thing. But watch out, and all he's got is like a little stick.
Oh my God.
He's like, stop! Don't do this to me! Don't do it! Look at that thing just catch air.
God.
Look at it catch air. Like, oh my God. It just flies at him.
Holy shit.
And swipes. And just ripped his arm apart.
That is insane.
Yeah,
And ripped his arm apart?
Yeah, his arm's,
That's what happened?
like, at the end of it, his arm's like half down.
That is insane. Oh my God. Oh.
Such a terrifying creature.
That scares me to death. When people always ask what if I'm scared of the work that I do meeting, I'm much more scared of animals than I am of people.
Well, there's a place in India called the Sundarbans, and the problem with that area is that tigers have been actively targeting people there for over 100 years. And so I think the numbers over the last 100 years, 300,000 people there have been killed by tigers.
Oh my, that is insane.
Yeah.
The people that just live there and work are probably farmers that are working
Just villagers.
farms and villagers.
Well, there's a bunch of things that happens. One, the typhoons come in and people die and they drown and they wind up in the river and the tigers eat them. And then two, there's an issue. 300 people and 46 tigers have been killed since 2000 in human-tiger conflicts in the Sundarbans. They've done a lot to mitigate it. That's only over the last, that's since 2000. That's over the last 23 years. It used to be a lot worse. And the problem is that the water is brackish. And so the tigers are drinking salt water. And apparently it irritates them. It's like very painful. So you got these angry, pissed off tigers that actively hunt humans. And so these guys that go out to try to survey, they're always trying to figure out how many tigers are there. They have to wear these helmets that protect the back of their heads, and the helmet have a mask on the back of the head so that the tigers like to sneak up on you. And if they see your face, they're less likely to attack. They like to attack you when your back is turned. So they have these helmets with a mask on the back to confuse the tigers.
And what are they doing to try and protect the villagers now?
Guns. That's it. I mean, what are they going to do?
Right.
There's so many of them.
Right.
I mean, it's where they live, and it's like a dense jungle. So good luck finding all of them.
Oh, that's so crazy. You know, we did a story on tiger trafficking, and in season 1, I think, and we spent a night in Thailand in one of these jungles where the last remaining tigers in Thailand are. And I mean, we were camping out with hammocks, and I didn't sleep at all because we'd been spending the day. They're showing us videos of the little cameras that they have activated all throughout the park, the jungle, so that when they step on it, it activates, right? So you see the tigers in the wild, and they're beautiful. But then you have to sleep. So the night there, I didn't sleep at all. It was the worst night of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
It's an amazing animal, though.
They're
I mean,
incredible.
it's fascinating and incredible that they exist, but this desire that people have to kidnap them and bring them to America and put them in a cage so they can just point to them and stare at them.
It's crazy.
Weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah. It is very strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
The people that go to these places as well to take photos. I don't get it.
What else did you cover this season?
So much of this technology is cheap now to get. So even if you were to show up with $2,000 worth of equipment, you could see if there was some scientific basis to what these people are doing. But from my understanding, I didn't go down the chi hole too deep, but a lot of these people aren't showing up and offering, volunteering to have their skills, tested. And that's how science works. You have to test it, right? And it has to be replicable.
Well, everybody wants to be Swami Rama, but nobody wants to do what Swami Rama did, right?
Yeah, who wants to sit in a cave? Well, some people do. Sit in a cave for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
He would go away for years at a time in a dark cave and just sit there and breathe. So in the modern age, I just don't know.
Freak that guy must have been. God, I would love to have talked to him.
Yeah, he had it all down.
Because there are people that can do that. They're like the Unabomber of breathing. They just move to the woods and but without the negativity.
But what was cool about him is he wasn't the only one who could do this. So there were researchers in the 20s and in the 40s who went out with a bunch of equipment, whatever equipment they could cobble together, and tested other yogis who were able to do this exact same thing, right? So Swami was part of this long lineage of people who had this knowledge. Is it still there? It could be, but again, I don't think it's online. I think you really have to get out in the weeds and earn these people's trust in order to get that story.
And what is what is the history of these people doing this? Like, what was their initial motivation? I mean, is there a written history of this?
The earliest evidence that we have for breathing practices dates back about 4,000 or 5,000 years from these little statuettes in the Indus Valley, which is in northern India. So there was this huge thriving civilization. They had paved roads, they had running water, they were dealing with tin and copper, and they had in this whole civilization, they still have not found any political or governmental buildings. They haven't found any religious iconography. So these people in some ways could have been more advanced than we are now. And they had all of these figures of these people in these yoga poses with their stomachs out. So that's how they date the earliest archaeological evidence of that. And since then all of these practices were moved into the Rig Veda and all of the earliest yoga texts, and they were codified in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's where a lot of the yoga methods come from, and that's about 2,000 years old. So
the methods predate all of that?
Oh, I'm sure they predate probably anything that has been in writing.
That's what's so curious to me. What makes me so curious, if you really think about what life must have been like back then, when they were creating this, you would think that people were hunting and gathering, and it was probably a very hard life.
Well, not in that civilization.
Right, but they got to a point where they had some sort of agriculture or some structures and buildings. But how did they get to the point? Because the rest of the world obviously didn't do this. This is not like common practice in Germany or in Italy or in all these other civilizations. Like, what made these people focus on breath work so much?
Well, it could have been, but we just haven't found anything related to that yet, right? So if you think about hunter-gatherers, we're imagining them as, man, they're just working all day, they're hunting all day, they're gathering. They weren't, from what I know and from what I've seen of the science there. Probably 3 or 4 hours of work, and then you have no other distractions to spend time and build these systems of breathing and health, which is what started in ancient China, which is what started in India, which is what started in ancient Greece. Think about all the distractions we're dealing with today. Constant interruptions. If you've already done your work for the day and there's nothing else to do, you're going to get more interested, and you're going to have the time to do some empirical studies to see what works and what doesn't.
It just seems to me that, like, learning something like that, learning something like prolonged breath work and the benefits of it, I mean, it seems like this is a really long-term practice that doesn't show you immediate benefits.
Yes and no. I think that you can take someone who has a serious problem, maybe someone who's already very fit. It's going to take a while to really see those big benefits. We see that with athletes with nasal breathing. It takes them weeks or sometimes months to really see gains in performance. But if you've got someone with a chronic condition like asthma or anxiety who are struggling to breathe every single day, and you teach them some basic breathing, some normal breathing patterns, their lives can be absolutely transformed. And we've seen this in study after study. So these people, their breathing has become so disrupted. They're breathing in such an unhealthy way that they don't know what proper breathing is. And just shifting that has a tremendous impact.
Let me ask you this on this topic. 2 or 2 follow-up questions on this. You talk about, when you sit down with Xi, you're going to tell Xi, here's what you do no matter what, or else, or Putin, when I, sit with Putin, here's what's going. These are some heavyweight people to sit with, where you have to be firm yet confident to deliver, and make sure they know that you're being serious about your, whatever declaration it is you're giving to them. Who are some of the most biggest heavyweights you've ever sat with that you've had to negotiate deals with? And in the business of coming up, can you name some names, some intimidating conversations you've had to build a $9 billion company that you built? Patrick Ben-David scheduling this town hall, that was pretty fantastic. I've sat across the table from MES. It's been to the palace downstairs in Saudi Arabia. He's a guy my age, talking about too young. I don't agree with a lot of what he's doing, but say what you will, he's a young guy who's taking the reins and taking the nation in a direction with a clear vision. Now, sat across the table from many of the wealthiest people in the world. These aren't guys who got to where they are by playing soft. And I didn't get to where I am by playing soft either. So I'm ready for the challenge. I think that these guys, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, like some of the older guys in both parties in our side of the pond, they're off the top of their game. I think their best days are behind them. You think so? I think so. Absolutely. I think so. I think there's some insecurities there. What makes you say that? Well, I mean, Putin is not well. I mean, Xi Jinping is now the different guy that he was. I mean, this is a guy who had, people who rise. I mean, you don't get to that position without having some kind of chip on your shoulder, right? I don't know, but most Americans don't know a lot about his story. I was curious about it. You got to know the man you're going to face off with. So I was actually an exchange student in China. I've been watching this man's rise for a long time. His father was actually exploited by Mao Zedong. Like, he was an official in the government. But what Mao Zedong did is you unleashed the cultural revolution of young people in China that went after the old guard and the Communist Party. So his dad was like abused, and Xi Jinping was taken out with him. And there were instances where he's on a stage, had to wear an embarrassing tin hat and have kids throw things at it. I mean, this is some psychologically scarring stuff, some weird happenings in a kid's upbringing. And then now you see the guy wearing the Mao Zedong suit, right? He's trying to imitate the guy who actually humiliated and in some ways medically harmed his father, put him through a psychologically torturous youth. There's some psychologically twisted stuff going on there, but there are also some deep-seated insecurities. Right? His ego is his main enemy. He was willing to put himself in a weaker position in substance to just hold on to that unprecedented third term of power. Watch what happened with Hu Jintao in that meeting where he took over that unprecedented third term. He had Hu Jintao literally, remember this video? Literally uncomfortably lifted out of his seat. And so, yeah, do I understand the people I'm facing off with? Yes, I do. Are they weak? Yes, they are. And I think the difference with me is, look, I'm an open book. I got nothing to hide. The start of this campaign, what do we do? Everybody's always about playing the game, especially wealthy people running for president. How are you going to delay and game the tax returns? We just put it out in the first few weeks of the campaign. Open book, had to have it. They're causing headaches for me. People ask the New York Times, ask this question or that question. Fine, we answered it. Got nothing to hide. And that's the approach I'm going to take to international relations, where I'm going to be very honest with people. I'm going to abandon the lie that I think we've told in the U.S. at times, that we're somehow a moral arbiter of what happens in the world. What I'm going to say is the truth. My job as U.S. president is to advance the interests of the homeland, to actually take care of American citizens. I have a moral obligation to my fellow citizens to take care of them and their interests first. And so when I end the war in Ukraine and I'm negotiating with Putin, a deal that pulls him out of his alliance with China, which in turn weakens China from being in a position going after Taiwan, say what you will. I don't trust Putin. He doesn't trust me. But we're going to know that we each trust each other to follow our self-interest. And we can have a clearer negotiation that if I'm saying that, oh, this is not a fight for democracy in some random nation that banned 11 opposition parties and consolidated state media into one arm, where we don't care beings about somebody invading another country in Africa. No, it doesn't make sense. But if you say that, no, I'm in this to just advance American interests, then two parties can reach a deal that makes sense for both parties. And when I make a deal, Patrick, I'm in the habit of being on the winning side of that trade. And that's exactly what I'm going to do when I'm negotiating trade deals and negotiating peace settlements on behalf of the United States. Third off, do you have a relationship with Modi by any chance? I think India is going to play a very important role. And they showed the level of courage they have by banning 100 apps from China, something America would even do with TikTok. Yeah. So is there any relationship you have with Modi? I don't know him yet. Okay. But, I did go in. I happened to be addressing Congress the morning before he came for his joint session. So I stuck around. One of the people had me as their guest. And so I stuck around and heard his address. I've been impressed by him as a leader. At the same time, I think that India is going to have to step it up a little bit. They haven't really met the full level of military commitments that I'd like to see. A little waffly on the trade relationship. And, understandably, the U.S. has also been a little bit less reliable than necessary. So I want to shore that up. If you think about a conflict situation with Taiwan, what people forget is the Indian Ocean is where the Middle Eastern oil supplies run through to get to China. And so if India is actually a reliable partner, that is a further deterrent to Xi Jinping even going after Taiwan. And I think I have probably the clearest vision of anybody in this race in either party, Patrick, of how to deter China from going after Taiwan while avoiding war over that island. I think it's going to be the most important thing the next president does from the standpoint of foreign policy. I will say, whether you are the president, you're a candidate, or somebody else is, the fact that your background, who you are, what you've done, India is going to play a very important role. I think you're going to need to be a prominent voice and influence the Knicks for a 12 years. I guess that's my opinion.
A little weird, relaxed. Did you ever do any fighting? I did kickboxing and I won tournaments. I was pretty good at Taekwondo. I won a bunch of state championships and I won a few national tournaments. When did you know you wanted to get physical with another human being and do this stuff? Because you can't be in right frame of mind and want to do this stuff. And I had to realize that. I was people that do this stuff are not in the right frame of mind. Yeah, and that's dealing with fear drives you insane. Yeah, deal with that drives people insane. And I was insane during my career. Yes, madly insane from fear. Yeah, obviously I never went through anything like the level that you went through, but for these full contact Taekwondo fights, I was always scared. And but I was scared before that. I was bullied. I moved around a lot. I was a little kid. I was never very big, and we moved from New Jersey to San Francisco when I was 7, and from San Francisco to Florida when I was 11, Florida to Boston when I was 14 or 13. So it's just always moving to new schools, always deal with new kids, and I wasn't big, and I didn't know how to fight, and I got picked on, and I didn't like it. So I said, I want to figure out how to fight. And so I started getting into martial arts, and I just became obsessed with it. I did it every day. I started teaching. I was teaching at Boston University. I was teaching the Taekwondo course when I was 19. I was competing from the time I was 15. I just threw myself into it. It's all I did every day. I worked at the school. I was there every day. I had the keys. I closed up. I opened up. And because of you, because hearing about you when you were running in the morning, when you knew that everybody else was asleep, that gave you an edge. I'd go there in the middle of the night and open up and work out. I just wanted to just have an edge, and I listened to what you said, and I said, that's a great way to have an edge. I became obsessed with it, but there was no future in it. And then what happened was I went from Taekwondo to kickboxing. And when I started kickboxing, I started getting fucked up. Dudes were beating the shit out of me because I was realizing I can't keep people at the same distance anymore because I didn't know how to use my hands properly. I knew how to throw some punches a little bit from Taekwondo, but it's not nearly sophisticated as boxing or kickboxing. And so then I started kickboxing training, and then I started realizing there's no future in this. What am I doing? I'm just getting my brains beat in, and I'm hard sparring too. The sparring was rough. It was Boston style, put the gloves on, beat the shit out of each other, figure it out as you go along. You go like, shit, figure it out as you go along. So a lot of headaches and, but it was hard for me to shut that part of me off, the part of me that just wanted to conquer, the part of me just wanted to win all the time, to figure out a way to be more intense, more driven, more focused. But when I did stop fighting, it was a huge relief. The relief part was worth the extra anxiety that I got. It was worth it just for the relief of not thinking about fighting all the time, not thinking about when's the next tournament, when's the next event, when's the next thing I'm doing. It was just, I don't know, that's weight. Well, for you, it had to be way crazier because nowadays, it's the heavyweight championship of the world. I always wanted to make my mentor happy. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
We turned
a hard.
I want to know why you think that that's real and what you think is going on in those stories.
Well, first you've got the dialogue itself, which is cool wisdom for all people.
Yeah, and some of it is hyper bizarre, what Oppenheimer quoted with the detonation of the atomic bomb.
Right.
I am become death,
Kalo
destroyer
Shmi
of worlds.
Lokshaya Krit Pravido.
Is that
time? That's the Sanskrit.
How does he say it?
Kalo Shmi Lokshaya Krit Pravido.
Is that why?
Time I am the destroyer. Time I am the great destroyer, and I've come to destroy all worlds. So that's one.
That's the actual translation.
That's the actual translation in English.
Because his translation, Oppenheimer's, was "I am become death." Is that because of an issue with the translation between Hindu and English?
It's just different people translate it, slightly different, but it's similar. Meaning, in that particular section that you pulled out, that was Krishna explaining God is beautiful, God is charming, God is your best friend. He's also death personified. So he's saying in that particular place, I'm actually also the destroyer of all the worlds. When we think of the yogis explain that God is everything, both the beauty and the destruction as well. And so Krishna just is sharing his attributes, and in that particular chapter 11, the Muslim was intimidating.
Where do you think all these stories come from? What do you think the origin of the Bhagavad Gita, of the Mahabharata, of of all the ancient texts, what do you think the origin was? What was the motivation to put this stuff down? What was the original concepts that led them to write this, and where did it all come from? There has to be an origin of these wisdoms, right?
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
You know, to even answer the question, I have to take myself out of Ragu and just answer like a yoga teacher.
Okay.
Because to answer of what do you think, it's one thing you're sort of trained not to do as far as what is your personal opinion. I can give you my personal opinion, but I have to separate it from what the stories themselves say.
Well, give me your personal opinion.
My personal opinion is I hear what the stories have to offer. I find some value in the stories, and I try to apply wisdom to my life. It helps the direction of my life. It helps me escape potholes.
I understand.
The stories themselves say these are all real. They're way beyond your perception. They were orally transmitted. At a certain time historically, they understood people are getting dumber. See, we have a tendency to think we're at the pinnacle of evolution, but the Vedic teachings is that as we go on in this age, we get more and more disconnected. There was a time where architecture was more evolved, where the sciences were more evolved.
Wait a minute, stop. The sciences were more evolved?
The sciences, like for example, the building of these vimanas, which when we read them now, we just think that's mythological. Even weaponry. Weaponry, they say, were done with sound. If you study, there's one book called The Donner.
But do you think this is real?
Do I think it's real? I think it could be. I don't think it's definite. I definitely don't know.
So you think at one point in time, human beings had vimanas and they flew around the sky, and then they had weapons that used sound?
Could. Why not?
Was no evidence, archaeological evidence, that there was a flying craft, or that there was ever any technology that allowed people to leave gravity.
Yeah. Sometimes there may not be evidence. Just like there's. Let me show you. What was the guy's name? Hill? Barney Hill. What's your evidence? You could just say, well, it's my own experience.
Well, I mean, he's just laying. That's a totally different thing. He's just relaying his personal experience. He could have had some sort of a psychotic break. He could have had. I mean, there could have been mass psychosis with him and his. I mean, with two people. Group psychosis with him and his wife.
I can say that there are things that make no sense to me, yet I sort of tried them anyway, and then after time they made sense. Like, well, wait a second, that does make sense. Or at different vantage points of my life, it didn't make sense when I was 20, but at 50, that makes a lot of sense. So there's certain things that are huge leaps of faith that I can't say I definitely know that to be true. Just like chanting on mantras, it made no sense. Made no real sense. But over time I realized actually that helps in this particular way.
But it achieves a state of consciousness. We've known that forever, that meditation in general achieves certain states of consciousness, and you can actually, with fMRI, you can actually monitor the changes in the way the brain is.
See, this is what I like about you. You're one of those guys. You get into these very interesting, like, subtle sciences, and then you find like hard evidence for these things. And just hearing that thing with James Wilk and breaking all these things down, I'm more of a simpler guy. I find people where I trust the way they live, and they've applied stuff and walked it's more like I can tell time, but I don't know how to take apart a clock and put it back together.
No, I think exactly the same way. I'm fascinated by watches.
Yeah.
But then you see all the gears behind a watch, like a self-winding watch, and you're like, I don't know what the fuck is happening here. I'm sure I can find it out eventually.
I'm like that with a lot of things, and I'm always impressed when you dig into it with people like this. But truthfully, if you want to know the honest truth, I was like, oh man, I hope Joe doesn't dig into it with me, because I'm not that kind of hard science guy. There's people like even all the stuff I did in yoga.
I'm concerned with you as a human being. That's why I asked you very specifically. What do you think?
Right. Well, I can say like the stuff that you liked about me fighting was endurance, flexibility. I give all the credit to yoga.
You did at the time.
Pranayam.
I've told many
fasting.
people that you had crazy cardio. And your cardio was, you never did cardio. You just did breathing exercises.
Never did cardio. Just sat down.
You always had great cardio. You always led like really good endurance.
And my cardio was even better I remember being at the bomb squad once on day 17 of a 21-day fast.
Wow.
Day 17, and I remember fighting, I can't remember his name, this cool guy. He's like, what? And you know how jiu-jitsu class ends when we're all tanked, and we're all like, and I just kept on going, and he's like, man, what is up with you? I was like, I don't know, I haven't eaten solid food in 17 days. So it's not like I'm a genius. It's just that these are sort of like yoga, fasting, deep breathing. I've just been doing them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people that can give you a modern take on what the benefits are. And
Yeah, but that's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is why you believe the Bhagavad Gita is real.
Sure. So my point is there's reasonable amounts of faith in these other things that I've applied that have made me take a next step. So whether I believe it's real, I just believe the truths I can extract from it are real.
Yes.
Whether the war actually happened, there's a leap of faith.
The benefits of those of following those scriptures you apply, and you feel those benefits. So that's enough.
That's enough to make me move forward towards
Yeah.
this. Just for example, the idea of faith. And because especially in America, we don't like the concept of blind faith. But if I saw you walking in downtown New York, let's take it the other way. You saw me, you're driving your Porsche, and you saw me walking in Manhattan. And you say, hey, Raghu, how do you get to Times Square? And I said, so the first step is I could lie to you. People lie all the time when you ask them for directions. But you have some reasonable faith. I know him. He's a friend. Why would he give me bad directions? So there's a reasonable amount of faith. But even still, people get into their egos and they just want to be the knower of directions. But I say you go up to 14th Street and you're going to see a McDonald's, you take a right. Then you're going to go down all the way to whatever, I can't even remember Manhattan anymore. Union Square, and take a left and go up 3rd. And then at Union Square, you're going to see a park. At that park, you take a hard left. So, again, you have some type of extended faith towards me, not blind faith. But you go up to 14th Street, and there's that McDonald's. As you go to McDonald's or that next signpost, you realize, okay, maybe he does know where he's going. Then you go farther, there's Union Square. Okay, I think he actually knows what's going on. And all of a sudden, you see the Times Square in the distance. So faith isn't just like, I believe. And if anyone was to say, I believe this, I believe in these Vimanas, I believe in mantras, I'd start to question them. But it happens with small degrees of things being just shown to you that you want to take. All right, what's the next step here? What do they say about this? What do they say about that? And then you apply it and see, well, does that work with me? And so, like I said, sometimes things didn't make sense. I remember when I first met monks, and they said, question about, or not even monks, but people who were just like following very strict with their sexuality, even in family. And the guy said, I don't have sex. I was 17, and I was like, you don't have sex with your wife? Are you crazy? I was like, no, we do other things. And I just couldn't understand that as a 17-year-old boy or 18-year-old boy. I couldn't understand why would you be with a person if not for that.
What was their answer?
It was because they said we're practicing detachment. We're practicing going internal to find our pleasure. And I said, what do you do for fun? And he goes, you go for a drive. I was like, you go for a drive? Are you crazy? But it was where this person was on his path of really controlling the senses and finding his pleasure internally. At time in my life, it made no sense whatsoever.
Maybe he really didn't like having sex with
maybe,
his wife.
or
He was
that,
looking for
or
some
that.
sort of an excuse.
Or maybe there was
We're going internal, baby. She's like, what? What's happening?
Maybe there was trauma. We don't know the whole story.
I see
Anyway.
what you're saying, though. That
But
applying this stuff, whether or not you break it down scientifically and objectively and try to analyze each and every word and whatever the translation is, you could actually apply those truths, air quotes, to your life and have real benefits.
Yeah. And other things are just, does it make a difference if Vimanas exist or not? No, it makes no difference in my practical life. Could they exist? Sure. It could, all these, it could answer a lot. I think a lot of these things we talk about, like life on other planets and aliens, they all are very much explained. Or here's another good one. What do these spiritual paths have in common? We train ourselves to find the differences in all of them. And the Vedic teachings say, don't you understand? You should be able to walk into a mosque, into a church, into a synagogue and say, how nice, these people are trying to connect. Not that we got to win these people over to our team, because they're all an illusion and they're all going to hell forever. Everyone's on a type of path, and I appreciate them trying to surrender. And the only thing that's going to get in their way, because people say things like this all the time, yeah, it's religion that caused all the problems in this world. And it's not religion, it's the ego that goes with joining a particular church, synagogue, ashram, etc., that we have it our way. And everybody else, they're a problem, and we got to fix it. That's what gets in the way. Because you could say materialism causes lots of problems as well in the world. So I don't think the ego's sneaky. It'll sneak into your diet. It'll sneak into your God. It'll sneak in. And that's why there's an appreciation instead of a condemnation of people that are different than us.
It is the ultimate who knows question, but goddamn, I wish more people from S4 would come forth. If Bob really did work with all those people and they really were briefed the same way he was, if we could get more of those people to talk, that would be utterly fascinating. Well, your show has a big reach, so maybe this time somebody will hear it. And will really anybody ever reach out to you that claimed to also have worked with Bob at SR? A bunch, yeah. And to verify, they could not be verified, and in fact, I think they were lying to me. And Bob shoots people down all the time. So that guy's fucking standing on UFO stage live. Bullshit. I mean, he hasn't even. He was hoping one other employee would. However, I have had people that work at Area 51 confirm parts of Bob's story. One in particular saw him coming off the jet, or he says he saw him coming off the Janet flights. I said, will you go on record with me that you met Bob there on the tarmac? No. Why? Everything we did there was confidential. We couldn't even tell our wives. Why would I go on record with you? And if he did go on record, he'd probably get harassed or arrested, or he can't even tell you what he ate for lunch out there. And one of the guys I was real excited to talk with just recently passed away. He actually started the bar that was at Area 51. So everybody told the bartender stuff. He started as a flower fund because no one would send flowers to wives when people died out there. But my point is, people have come forward to George. To me, a lot of people are lying. But it adds up over time, man. I got more than 24 people who have come to me with bits and pieces of the story, who had worked out at Area 51 that I confirmed were out there. Security people who had seen a disc under a tarp in a hangar. Different people had worked there at different times, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, who had little pieces of the story, not to confirm Bob. And then there was one that I pursued. I don't know if you want to keep going on this. I pursued this guy. I was trying to find in the early 90s people who were in a position to know about what goes on out there, and I found one. And he had been active in the nuclear weapons program. He had worked for EG&G. He had EG&G had the contract to manage Area 51 from the beginning, all the way through the first 30 or 40 years of it. And so I started basically stalking the guy. One of his sons was a state senator, and he had told me, he confided to me, that you got to ask my dad about UFOs and aliens. And another son had been an FBI agent. So I stalked the guy, introduced myself. There were a couple of public events where I would just show up. And he finally got confident enough in me to invite me to his home. And he gets out these scrapbooks, and he's showing me these stories and clippings and photos from the nuclear weapons program. And I'm watching him, taking notes and stuff. And suddenly he closes the book and he goes, "You're not here to talk about this nuclear weapons, are you?" I said, "No, not really." And his wife walks in and she says, "Oh, you're not going to tell him that stuff, are you?" And then he started telling me. And then over the course of 2 years, I would meet with him, have a cup of coffee somewhere. I couldn't take notes. I couldn't record anything, but he told me the story. Now, this guy actually is someone that you've had reference to on your show. Remember Annie Jacobson, her book about Area 51? Yeah. Well, it's the same guy, but the story that he told me was different than what he told her. He said that they eventually told me that they had a live alien out there. That I could not go public with this until after he died, that they had craft, that it was in a special spot. Originally was at Indian Springs, which is now Creech Air Force Base, and then it was moved to Area 51 when 51 became active. And then there was a very small group that tried to analyze this stuff. They didn't know where it was from. They didn't know how we obtained it. He said this thing was alive, and that they eventually were able to communicate with us, and told me that he was going to make a videotape and he was going to make it available so that after he died, I could have it. Well, suddenly, 2 or 3 years later, he totally changes his story. What had happened was there was a congressional investigator. His name was Richard D'Amato, and he worked for Senator Robert Byrd, and he oversaw black budget projects. And he got onto this UFO story from Whitley Strieber. And so he was assigned, find out what the deal is. So he went around the country, talked to different researchers, and came to me and wanted to know about Area 51 and Lazar. So I told him the story, and I told him about this guy. And he got permission for this guy to violate his security oaths and talk to him about it. And they had multiple conversations, and they went to the founders of EG&G, the company, and it became a dead end. But after that congressional inquiry, this guy completely changed his tune. So he made up this story, which is the one that you heard from Andy Jacobson, that what crashed at Roswell was a Russian technology, Nazi technology, flown by the Russians, containing little concentration camp victims who'd been experimented on by Dr. Mengele. Completely ridiculous, story. But I think he got scared. He was a real guy in a real position to know, and had shared with his family some of this information. I think the story that he told me was legit. But if he made the tape, which I think he did, I didn't get it. How much time has been wasted talking about bullshit? Yeah, and this subject. Centuries. Centuries. That's part of the problem, isn't it? People just make shit up. Yeah, and the more fanciful and ridiculous, the better. Unfortunately, people pay more to hear that and consume it. I had an operation one time after the Lazar thing. Somebody who was targeting me, and he had other people helping him, that convinced me that he had worked out there with live aliens. And I'm getting letters from his, supposedly written by his neighbors. Hey, you got to check this guy out, Dr. I'll just say X. He was taken away by armed security in the middle of the night. I think he has something to do with aliens. And from out of the blue, then suddenly I'm at a planetarium event, and I'm going to speak about UFOs at some event at this community college. And the guy shows up in a men's room. Hey, my name is Dr. X. Standing there at the urinal. You're not doing a story about me, are you? So no, who are you? What? This was a concerted effort to get me to believe that he had worked out there. And it went on for a couple of years. And of course, it was complete bullshit. When I finally did dig into his background, I was able to document where he had worked and what he'd been doing through most of his life. And it was just like a fantasy role-playing thing. At least I hope it was.
I wanted to bring something up, but I kept forgetting. I didn't want to interrupt your rant. I posted something, I retweeted something the other day about this boy that was raised by wolves in India. Yeah? Have you ever seen that? No. Good. See if you can find that from a few days ago. I retweeted it. I want to know if it's true. That's from I was too lazy to Google it. I was like, I'll just bring it up with a podcast. Yeah, well, I just retweeted it. I take no responsibility for retweet. It's the best way to fact check is just tweet something. Also, retweets for me are just like, I think this is interesting. Maybe you will too. All right, that's what I do it for. So this is it. The Wolf Child in 1889. Wow, how do you say that word? Bulandeshar region of the Indian forest. There resided Dina Sanachar, a feral child of nearly 6 years old. Sanachar lived amidst a wolf pack, adapting to their ways and partaking in their activities. This remarkable case serves as a vivid demonstration of the impact of environmental factors on human behavior. It exemplifies how the availability of resources, the upbringing environment, and the ability to adapt to surroundings during childhood can shape an individual's physical and mental abilities, ultimately ensuring survival. I mean, this is kind of what we've been talking about. Yeah, totally, man. Look at that kid. Look at his face. That's crazy. I mean, this is probably why you should be very careful about who your friends are, because maybe we look like our dogs, but definitely, like in a group of friends, you warp. You will shift into something that harmonizes with all of them. So how about girls who become boyfriends with serial killers and then go and kill people together? They pick up girls and kill them together. Oh, crazy. People have done that. Crazy. Like, that's a real thing that's happened more than once, where a guy will be a serial killer and he'll convert his girlfriend to becoming a serial killer, and they can kill people together. What does that conversation start off like? The story does not know a lot. The only thing that really that's not true about that story is that he wasn't the only kid. There was, oh wow, he was at least one of two at that time they found. But wow, there might have been a couple more. Wow, that's crazy. Oh my God. Raised by wolves. You know, look at him. It's like he got trained by a wolf. It's the reverse situation. Look at that. He took up the habit of smoking cigarettes. Wouldn't you, if you're surrounded by wolves for your old family? What the these five other? Did you learn how to talk and everything? No, it said they never learned how to speak. Wow. Damn. This reminds me of that video we played a few times from the Dark White Underbelly, that family. Yeah. The boy in Sleeman's story died a few months after being brought back to human society. Whoa, couldn't deal with it. He smoked out of the wolf's den. Where did he get cigarettes? No, did he? It said he smoked out of the wolf den. That's kind of weird, right? Like, in the wolf den, they kept him there? Look, where was it? Scroll, wait, the boy in Sleeman's story, like the boy who smoked out of the wolf's den, died a few months after being brought back to nuts, was smoked out of the wolf. Oh, why? Oh, we're not, smoke him out, like George, but we're going to smoke him out. Or, hey, I got you. He wasn't white. Everyone W said that. Oh, we're going to smoke them out of their holes.
When it comes to endogenously created experiences, have you ever looked into what people experience doing Kundalini yoga?
Yeah.
Have you?
That's pretty interesting. I practiced yoga
for
a little time. Well, I studied Sanskrit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I studied Sanskrit.
So you can read that stuff?
Yeah.
So with Kundalini yoga, which I think is very, I've not practiced it. I've only done like your bullshit soccer mom yoga.
That counts too.
I've done some other kind of classes, flow classes and classes to music and stuff like that. But most of the yoga that I've done has been that Bikram stuff, that 90-minute hot yoga. It's 20-something poses. You do them the same ones every day. I really loved it. But I know that gives you some sort of strange high. It really does. Like when you leave there, like it's not a coincidence that yoga people are all flaky and super peaceful. Like it really, it does something for you that it just puts you in a very relaxed and unique state. But Kundalini, as practiced by several people that I know, I've just never done it, is supposedly you can reach states that are very similar to being on psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
In terms of like absolute visions, geometric patterns that are flowing around you, like, but you're not supposed to concentrate on that, which is interesting. Like at least according to one of my friends who took it, his instructor was saying that you're getting distracted by trying to have these experiences.
That's not the goal. It's decidedly not. They call them the siddhis, the powers that arise. And it can be everything from visions to supernatural powers and
supernatural powers.
Supernatural.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Like, what have they claimed?
Well, when you're traveling outside time and space, the ability to see into the deep past and the far future, the ability to transport your body, to teleport, all kinds of mental telepathy and things like that. I mean, that's not the goal of yoga, obviously. They call them the siddhis. But it happens.
Does it, though?
Well, it's sure. We have lots of literature that attests to it.
8 classical siddhis. Anima, the ability to reduce one's body to the size of an atom.
That's a superpower.
Yeah. Mahima, the ability to expand one's body to an infinitely large size. Lagima, the ability to become weightless or lighter than air. Garima, the ability to become heavy or dense. And Prapti, the ability to realize whatever one desires. That one seems like a problem.
It's not a superpower you want.
Yeah, that seems like it'd be a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to be the king of the world.
You can handle it.
I don't know if I could.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody could.
Yeah. And that's kind of the whole point, is that you're talking, what you just talked about is the way the ego gets in the the way it steps into this river, right? So in all these spiritual practices, it's supposed to be about the deflation of the ego. And so if you're going through these spiritual exercises and these praxis and these disciplines, and your ego is still very much intact, then when the superpowers arise, what do you do with them? I think that's the dangerous part of any spiritual discipline. It's the dangerous part of psychedelics, for sure. Because you get this dramatic insight into the nature of yourself and maybe the underlying structure of the cosmos, and all of a sudden you think you're all-knowing,
right,
and maybe all-powerful.
Well, also you sort of espouse that to others who haven't experienced it, and there's like the guru thing that happens, which I think is really problematic for Western people. For whatever reason, there's a lot of, especially men in Western culture, that get involved in those things, and then they become leaders, and they're semi-cult leaders, you know?
And talk this notion of the hungry ghosts is, it's preta in Sanskrit. Speaking of more Sanskrit, so preta are these hungry ghosts who are constantly hungry, constantly thirsty, and no matter how much they feed or try and satiate themselves, it's never enough. And so it's sort of this metaphor for the Western mind and consumerism and extraction. And wouldn't it be a shame if we approached psychedelics, yoga, all these spiritual disciplines with that sort of that broken Western mentality, trying to figure out what this can do for me?
Yeah, that's what it is. What can this do for me? Most psychedelic experiences that I've ever had, one of the key sort of overwhelming aspects of it is to get out of your own way, and that you're in your own way, and that you thinking about yourself and you thinking of yourself, and it's just wasted energy, wasted. And that instead you should be thinking about like the things you're doing and how you're interacting with the world. And also your ego's just bullshit. It's just some leftover chimp shit that's designed to keep us alive. It's designed to make sure that you procreate, make sure that you think very highly of yourself. So you want to procreate.
But you came to psychedelics later in life, right?
Yes, yeah.
Was that a good thing?
Yeah, probably, because I made a lot of mistakes. And, you learn from that. Like, you do need mistakes in life. And you also need to understand what it's like to be very stupid, very foolish, and young and brash. And then also older and more experienced, but still know nothing in terms. I mean, you really, as much as you know, the smartest person alive knows basically nothing about the nature of the universe. You might know things on a molecular level, on a cosmic level. You understand how galaxies are formed. That's cute. But you really fucking don't know shit. The night skies, I'm sure. Have you seen the night sky in a place where there's absolutely no light?
Yes, but sadly, like I can count it on two hands.
I can only count it on one. Well, twice. The second time not as profound, but I went to the Keck Observatory on the Big Island, and you go. The first time I went, it was quite a while ago. And when we first drove up there, I was really bummed out because it was so cloudy. I was like, this sucks. We're not going to be able to see anything. But then when we went through the clouds to where the observatory is, there's nothing. It's just stars. And you get out and you're like, oh my God. It's like being on a spaceship. It's like you're in a convertible spaceship and you're hurling through the galaxy. Because what they've done on the Big Island is pretty profound. They put these lights, the street lights are, a type of light that doesn't expand outward. What is it called? What are those lights called, Jamie? You're a photographer.
Diffused.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Diffused lighting. So diffused lighting all throughout the Big Island, so it doesn't fuck with the light pollution issue that you get when you're trying to look at the real sky. So even though there is light from these, streets and all that, it doesn't affect it. When you're way up there, it's a couple hours drive from the shore. And you get up there, and it's just the one time that I went there, and I guess this is about 20 years ago, the one time I went there was just like, oh my God. Just, oh my God. Like, you can't believe it. You can't believe it's so much. And it really made me sad because I was like, that's what people used to see every night. That's what people used to see every night before these jackasses invented electricity. Work better or the same as work, like for managing depression?
The workout is maintenance. It doesn't achieve much, but I achieve the workout.
But do you feel like the endorphin release? Does that help you?
Yes. Yeah, it does. And I, as the Buddhists say, I made merit. I went in there and did my time on the treadmill. I don't want to be there. It's like the last 15 minutes. I'd rather be somewhere else. Like, it's cool. You'll be fine. Sit down, do your work.
That's why before the podcast, I was suggesting hot yoga to you. And you seem to be very stiff lately. You've got some injuries and some things that are
it's all
bothering
coming back.
you.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm telling you, that'll fix a lot of that shit. It'll really
I know you
change.
have a great workout diversity. When you and I were talking before, we were at your place, and you said some mornings you feel like training this way, and you'll go to that gym, or you'll train like judo or whatever, and then the next day it's going to be kettlebells. So you really like to mix it up. I think it's good for a body to always be guessing what's coming next.
Yeah, I think that's important. There's some things that I really have to do. I think I need at least 1 day of hard cardio a week, and I think I need at least 1 day of hard lifting weights a week, but I also think I need at least 1 day of yoga a week, at least. Yoga is, to me, it's one of the most important things that I do, because for that 90 minutes, I can't go anywhere. I don't touch my phone's not in the room with me. It's just me and a jug of water and the yoga mat and the class and a bunch of old ladies that are kicking my ass. These old ladies are fucking tough, man. There's this old lady. She goes to this workout class with me. I see her there all the time. She's got to be close to 70. She doesn't even bring water. She just toughs it out. She's there for 90 minutes, sweating and grunting through the postures. And you're doing an hour and a half class, those last 20 minutes in 104 degrees, it's so hard to get through. But when you get through, you just feel like you feel better. While I'm in it, I can't wait to do it again. Like while I'm struggling, and I was like, God, I need to do more than this. I need to do this more often, rather. I can't wait to do this again. Like I always feel that. And it just lengthens everything. Like all the back things and the leg things, the hamstring things, just stretches everything out, lengthens it, and all the tension, it just straightens it out and loosens it up. And I just feel like for a guy like you or I, who does a lot of like, especially like used to do a lot of heavy lifting, you were saying, a lot of deadlifts and squats, this is the antidote for all that stuff. Right. It's decompression and for your body maintenance. It's just phenomenal.
Probably lets loose the lactic acid out of your muscle tissue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here's what I've observed. I live in Los Angeles, so there's a lot of yoga people.
Yeah.
But, I know them because they have a mat. Mm-hmm. But you can also see how they walk, how they sit. They're so in their body. Yeah. And there's a grace to, I'm not trying to put anyone in the pejorative, but a yoga person, where there's, not only are they limber, they're just really okay. Their body articulation, you're like, okay, I don't have that. I'm a herky-jerky, uncoordinated person, but there's a hum coming from that person's overall body. It's a beautiful machine, the way they articulate themselves and the way they sit. I'm like,
it's a very unusual balance, the balance of like the
But you can tell someone who does it, they have that.
Yeah.
And it's not subtle. I recognize it.
You would love it, man. You know what, you would love it? Because it fucking sucks. And while you're doing it, man, you have the internal dialogue's crazy.
Yeah, you want to bolt.
Well, you want to bolt, but you also start going over your life and your mind and dealing with all your bullshit and your to-do list and all the things you're doing wrong or slacking. There's something about really struggling in these static positions for like a minute where you're trying to like hold your leg up in the air and your sweat is literally pouring off your arms and your head, and there's something about that, man, that it's just really cleansing. It just really empties you. I just think it's a thing that you're missing, that you would really love if you tried. I bet if you did it, and then you came back and we did a podcast a year later, be like, fuck yoga! I fucking love it! It's changed my life. It's changed my life.
Yeah, I know a lot of fighters, a lot of people who like are hectic for a living.
Yep.
They're yoga people.
Yep.
And like in the 70s, you say yoga, someone's going to punch you.
Yeah.
Like yoga, wham.
Well, you know why I found out about it? Do you know who Hickson Gracie is?
Well, are we talking about the Gracie, the family?
Well, the family, Hoist Gracie's the most famous because he's probably the most important figure ever in the history of martial arts, because he won the first Ultimate Fighting Championship and showed that a small man can actually beat larger men with technique and skill. Well, his brother is Hickson, and his brother is like universally regarded as one of the greatest jiu-jitsu guys, if not the greatest of all time. And he was different than everybody else in that he did yoga. Like his thing was, like I'd never heard of a martial artist that got into yoga, but Hickson would do these breathing exercises and he'd do these balance beam exercises, and he was always doing yoga and stretching, and that was a giant part of his workout. And he was above and beyond everyone else in his time period. Like in the 90s, everyone was scared of Hickson. He was the man. I mean, but it wasn't like there was any debate. It's very rare that you get something that is so antagonistic and so tightly contested as two men using martial arts techniques trying to strangle each other, and one guy stands above all by such a large margin, and that was Hickson. And I really do believe that part of it was his mind, part of it was his physicality, but a lot of that physicality was enhanced by his dedication to yoga. Yeah, he's a legit yogi. Like he does that fire breathing shit where he sucks his stomach in that weird way and has it move up and down.
Wow.
You ever see someone do that? Yeah. He does that like a real yogi. Like it's a real trip. And I think because of his like physical, like you can see it there. He's got this video here. You can see him do this fire breathing shit. Like watch what he does with his stomach. It's kind of fucking crazy. He sucks his stomach way, way, way up deep into his rib cage. He does this breath of fire thing, and then as it gets going, he starts pumping his, like here, see it if you pull it up there, Jamie, to the part where he starts to do it. Look at this.
Wow.
Yeah, like what the fuck, man? Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And that's just one of the things.
He has abdominal muscle control.
Yeah,
who gets that? That's a muscle group you never try and articulate, make it do anything.
Yeah. Well, he practiced yoga for a long, long, long time. And because of that, he had this phenomenal core strength and phenomenal balance. And he just had a giant advantage over everyone else. And I think a lot of that advantage was his ability to move his body was different. But it's also just, for a guy like you that's been just lifting weights for so long, it's the perfect antidote for your body. It's like your body will react to like, oh yeah, stretch this out. Thank you. We've been asking for this.
Yeah.
You know, lengthen this. Hold that pose. This is, instead of just lifting something, you know, which is like what men like to do. Instead of that, you're holding your arms out there like that. You're like, fuck, I don't even have any weight in these things and I want to drop them.
Yeah, I've done every once in a while I've worked out with someone else and they go, okay, we're going to do this and this, and then you work out with, and then you let yourself be trained.
Yeah.
And I've done a few workouts. They go, okay, I'm going to kill you. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, by the end of this, you won't be able to take your shirt off to change. And I've done, where you're benching this much, then this much, then this much. You end up doing like 150 reps. And by the time you can't lift the bar, and you can't lift your arms. You're literally trembling from exhaustion. And I've told that to people. They go, that's yoga. You will tremble from exhaustion.
Yeah.
And you'll be so happy when you leave because of how good you feel, and you can't wait to go back.
And you won't blow your joints out the way you will with weightlifting.
I already have.
Yeah, there's no way around it.
I've
This is a scene from the Iranian film Tall Shadows of the Wind, made only 1 year before the Iranian Revolution. The scene shows the people of a village revolting against the tyrannical scarecrows that have been ruling their lives and controlling their destinies. The scene, however, is not a typical one. In a country in which dictatorship is a political tradition, a provocative scene like this would not be tolerated by the censors. So it comes as no surprise that the next scene appears to serve as a disclaimer. We realize that what we saw was only a dream scene, the last dream of a dying man who made a one-man attempt to fight the despotic scarecrows and failed. The dream, however, is still alive. At his deathbed, the dying man, a driver, hands a piece of rock to the village teacher, something he has carried with him while battling the scarecrows. In a symbolic way, he is leaving the task of fighting to the school teacher. In spite of its being a dream, the uprising scene is a symbolically significant one since it accurately reflects the long-standing dream of a nation for a liberating revolution, a dream that has always been betrayed.
Living alone with her mother, the brother is away, comes back sometime. She's of a marrying age, and she thinks she's found some...
Why did you choose to have 2 empty seats at the dining table?
Well, those 2 seats belongs to 2 absent men. The father is died, and the brother is gone. We don't know where, but it presents that these 2 women need support.
محمد
متاسفم.
When it finally all unravels, it's terribly downbeat in American terms. He hasn't been her admirer. Yes, I suppose in a sense he has, but nevertheless he's been following her to capture her brother. And the film ends with him, the pursuer, taking the brother away and handcuffed, leaving the girl in tears, in desolation.
It's not until towards the end, I suppose partly the slightly menacing appearance of the Savak agent, that you realize that actually, although she wasn't living in fear, because she was very naive, she should have been. And her greatest mistake was not to have been living in fear. And that's what ended up with her brother being taken away to torture and possibly death.
Parvez Syed, the director of Dead End, like many other Iranian filmmakers, has been living in exile since the 1979 revolution, a revolution that brought him his own bitter share of betrayed hopes and shattered dreams.
What do you think happens to the girl after the shattering experience she goes through in the film?
She gets a little bit experience.
She would receive a kind of, not a mortal blow, but a blow to her self-esteem and her confidence in herself, which it would take her many years to recover from, because she had the double horror of being part.
Dead End is a beautiful film. Beautiful in every sense that I can think of. Very subtle colors, almost into black and white, because I'm certain that Syed wanted that film to have a gloomy, repressive overall effect, and his use of a street out of which the young girl, the heroine, constantly looks, is at a dead end. And at that dead end, there's the message, flat out, dead end, no place to go from here, and beautifully done.
These films are making a very heavy allusion to the incredibly destructive effects of having such a system of surveillance widespread through the country, even stretching into tiny villages in the middle of nowhere.
The setting for Tall Shadows of the Wind seems to be one of those tiny villages in the middle of nowhere. In the beginning of the film, we see the inhabitants of the village in a mass ritual, praying that their god send them a liberator, someone to bring them prosperity and justice. Hoping for liberation, the villagers start erecting a scarecrow for their protection. But ironically, the scarecrow soon multiplies itself into a tyrannical army of scarecrows and begins to terrorize the villagers.
Yes, we make our own dictators because we can tear them apart if we like. And this is why the title Tall Shadows of the Wind really comes from a sentence that if you know the origin of the wind, you're never afraid of the tall shadows of the wind. And that's what we really are proposing in this particular film, that we make these deities ourselves and they start ruling our lives. And this is why in the film they make a scarecrow for very, very simple economical reasons, not religious reasons, because they want better crop and so on. And that scarecrow eventually starts ruling the village. Now, the fact that it actually happened because we made Khomeini, we made the Shah, and if we always have been having dictators all through our history, there is something inherently wrong with us as people. And this is why I was proposing that we should tear them down and start all over again.
The all-pervasive sense of fear by a regime of systematic terror, to the point where, with the system of informers under which, with which every terror regime operates, nobody ends up by trusting anybody else. People become incredibly individualized, isolated. They won't talk to their neighbors or their friends or even their closest, their husbands or their mothers, about the experiences they've had.
We start at the beginning of the film with a lot of color in the clothing, in the decorations in the rooms and everything. You see very vibrant colors everywhere. And as the fear of the scarecrow gradually grows, we have faded out the colors. I mean, you potentially see the same dress worn by the same woman, but we had 3 shades of it. And in the last 45 minutes of the film, you are practically seeing black and white in color before the revolution sequence, and that's why it shocks. I mean, the red shocks so much, and then immediately after that we go more or less to total black and white in the funeral procession. And one of the objects was, as the fear grows, the color out of our lives goes out, and I just wanted to do this so gradually that it's not a shocking aspect, but eventually it's there.
I think, like in many nations, there are, of course, 2 levels of Iranian film. There's a popular level and a more artistic level.
But one of the things that's most interesting about both levels is that on the popular level and on the artistic level, there's an extraordinarily moral quality to Iranian film. Even when we have films that are rather political in nature, the basic ideals and morality of Iranian life are being pointed up and being emphasized. There are a great number of themes which deal with the defeat or destruction of the main character. But I think if we examine the Iranian moral universe more carefully, we find that there are many, many examples where what seems to be defeat can actually be a victory as long as it's a moral victory. The main character achieves this moral victory by refusing to sell out or refusing to yield to a superior power which is corrupt and illegitimate. And this is a theme that we find again and again in many Iranian films. Even in a situation where the character seems to be utterly devastated, the real redemption, the real hero in the film may in fact, in this case, be the spectator, because the spectator becomes made aware of the disparity between a corrupt superior power and a person who's been victimized by that power. So the feeling of moral enhancement or moral enlightenment is achieved in this kind of plot construction.
Dr. William Beeman, a professor of anthropology at Brown University, specializes in cross-cultural communication. He spent more than 11 years in Iran prior to the 1979 revolution, studying the Iranian arts and culture.
One of the most important aspects of Iranian political film is that it's cast in an Iranian symbolic universe. That means that in order to be able to understand Iranian political film, we also have to understand Iranian literature and poetry, and to a certain extent other artistic traditions like music and painting.
The story was a short story, so we had to develop it. And that's where I started utilizing the other stories in that book and somehow coordinating them together and making a total story as we see it in the film. And then we worked together, on the screenplay for, I remember, for 10 or 12 days. And then when the screenplay was ready, the problem was to find a producer. And of course, none of the existing producers would dare to invest in a film like that. So we submitted it to the Ministry of Culture as a kind of a documentary film. And they had a tradition of making documentaries and things like that. So hopefully we could arrange the budget and also utilizing all the actors of the Ministry of Culture who were already employed in the theater section. We don't know how or why, and I mean, this riddle remains all through the film. But the impact of this death upon the villagers, and particularly on Masht Hasan, is tremendous. So much so that Masht Hasan, out of his love or his attachment to this animal, he gradually undergoes a severe change in his psychological outlook. So much so that he somehow considers himself as a cow. He just identifies himself so much with this animal that he believes that he is the cow himself.
An Aristotelian problem with it, it becomes so pathological that you feel that this is an excessive example of it, and though it does indicate that the narrow margin, how close, you know, these people are to the breaking point.
Here's a man whose greatest possession in life is a cow. When the cow is gone, so to speak, his life is gone.
I should say I also chose the cow because when I was giving that version of the film course, I began the course by trying to focus on images of the Third World in the United States. And at that stage particularly, the image of Iran was one of the clearest in people's minds, the whole barrage of hostile propaganda which circulated within this country. And therefore it struck me as being a good thing to as perpetual chanting fanatics. And I think it was an illumination to the students.
The reason that the film actually was censored, was confiscated for about a year and a half or 2 years was particularly because of that. Because at that time, if you remember, it was the peak of Shah's, particularly talking about the, you know, the underprivileged, the poor people, etc. This is one of the current issue that you see now in the Iranian cinema.
Bob also broke the mold of the cinematic formula in Iran. It was telling people that that a new form of artistic expression could be represented on film.
The Sealed Soil is one of the films that took advantage of the new artistic possibilities and experimented with a new visual language in Iranian cinema.
I'm trying to get out of Hollywood style. I think each filmmaker has to bring their own country's cultural background into their filmmaking. And since I studied painting and I'm very interested in miniature painting, I'm trying to use that format as my style, and I've combined that with the European aesthetics of Brecht. In Persian miniature, you have a whole story in a book told in one frame of the miniature, and you have the subject matters are all around the painting. It's up to the viewer to pick up the story and give it a meaning. The whole becomes one and one becomes whole. I've tried to do that with my composition. I feel that you don't have to have close-ups to accentuate in what you're trying to say. You could do it by other means, like recurrence of motifs, or in other words, the action recurring again.
So I think audiences would tend to find that pace too deliberate, and the development of the character. Also, we're brought up by movie conventions. You know, we have a quick cut, and you get psychological development every shot, you know, and everything that way. And this doesn't operate on the psychological level at all. I can go with slow when it, or apparently slow, because slow is misleading. There's no such thing as slow. What people mean slow, they mean there isn't a lot of plot, there isn't a lot of action, or the way you photograph somebody coming from somewhere. If you understand that that is ritual, and then there's no such thing as slow. If you understand the formal structure of something is painterly or ritualistic, then the slowness, you understand it. But if you don't understand what's going on, you just think this person just wants to waste time showing somebody walking. I mean, the idea that if you don't get the meaning that comes out of watching every step.
I'm trying to get into the idea of being distanced from the character, so that we are looking at them objectively, and we are trying to understand what the problem is.
The Sealed Soil is the story of a young village woman under pressure to conform to the rigid norms of a communal life.
این دختره چه شده؟ از مردم دوری میکنه. با کسی حرف نمیزنه. 18 سالشه. خیلی از وقت شوهر کردنش گذشته. شاید برای همین باشه. پس چرا جواب رد به همه داده؟ چشمش کردن.
She's being criticized because she is a different woman from what her older generation have been, and that's why she's being questioned and she's being criticized. But she, at the same time, she's not that different. She's in a state of moving from one awareness to another. She cannot follow her older generation's way of thinking and behavior. She's trying to find her grounds, and in that she's lost herself. She is lost, but at the same time she is trying to find some kind of an awareness, and I think that's what they're criticizing, and because they don't understand it. And also the fact that she's trying to be an individual. That is, I think, the most important thing in the film. The village life is such a communal life. I think what my protagonist is doing is trying to be an individual, and that's very hard for the villagers. Her past, her traditional life is and her what she has now is not giving her anything. So she hasn't come to consciousness yet, but she knows that she's missing something, and I think what is making her know that she's missing something is what is out there, the city life, the westernization of Iran that's creeping into the villages. She's been influenced by that indirectly, but she herself is not aware of it. All she knows is that things have changed and she's changing. And I think that's her dilemma. I don't believe in having the audience sympathize with the character, because that is going to create a false sympathy, and instead of the audience really trying to find out what is the problem and what is causing that, they start identifying with the character, and as the result they emotionally become so involved that they forget about being objective, and they become very subjective, and my whole criticism about Hollywood film is that it makes the audience so much involved emotionally with the character that they totally forget about the cause and effect.
نه چیزیش نیست. ولش کن، چیزیش نیست.
باید مشرده رو بیاریم که شیطون از تنش بیرون کنه. باید اونو توی اتاق تنها بذاریم. در روش ببندیم تا مشرده برسه.
نه من اونو با خودم میبرم.
This woman, the girl, completely breaking up, cracking, rejecting this world. That's the only way she can do it, is through madness, that she can rebel. And she does it. And I think you would be drawn to that. You would say, look, I'm here. I understand what's happening to you. I think this is a natural tendency. So I think there's a kind of logic to this construction, to the people who feel that the tragic vision, because they're the people who suddenly dimly perceive the nature of the betrayal, the nature of the repression, nature of the evil that's being practiced, the inequity, the injustice.
I was trying to show the repression of women in Iran, and but underneath that was another repression, which was the people's repression.
The trouble is that what happens is there's a conservative tendency in communities, and they have a different view. You know, that community, let's say that story is absolutely true, with a woman who goes crazy, doesn't want to follow the traditional practice, doesn't want to be turned over like a piece of farm equipment. They'll say, oh, she's crazy, oh, she's, you know, which is reflected there. But most of the audience is looking at it says, oh, she's crazy, doesn't understand.
It's going to be taking a long time to have our society change, especially women's condition.
The movie is honest in this respect, and this is why it's not popular. I think the reason audiences would not go for it, even audiences, even people who feel, you know, women are, you know, not treated well, and they would want her to fight more, to come to understand what it is that's happening to her. But the artist here is too honest to let this person give you the big dramatic scene, the big Paul Newman scene. Ah, I understand, and this is how we do it. You know, this is what audiences want. They want the big hero or heroine to rise up and make a big speech or make a big gesture or something that the audience can identify with. Yes, I can control my destiny. The trouble here is where the pessimism comes in. This woman cannot do that. She hasn't been educated, she hasn't been trained. It's impossible for her to find the words to express. She can only do it most inarticulate, primal way, deep inside her. And that's honest, but nobody wants to see that. In other words, it's saying you're trapped, there's nothing you can do. This is the only way you can express it through pathology. People don't want to hear that. But that's rather depressing.
A film that shows the misery of a family or a village is not necessarily a pessimistic film, but it is to make the audience to see why they are unhappy and try to do something about it. A village life is extremely vocal. It's extremely with a lot of expressions. I try to oppress all that because I was trying to bring in something which I'm trying to say, that oppression always brings in silence, and I was trying to show that through their silence and through their motionless, they were totally immobile, and for me that was what the oppression had done to them, and that was my way of political way of dealing with how an oppressive system can change someone's life.
I think the repression indicates that something has to happen within the people to change them, as in addition to before anything can happen outside. That is, if you want to repress your neighbor, or repress your daughter, or repress your son, or repress your people who are weaker than you are, then there's going to be somebody above you who's going to repress you. It's going to be a chain. You have to break the chain somewhere. And this is where, you know, I differ with the Marxists, I differ with the left. I believe the change has to come from within. I think the change people have to change right from within the circle. If we become more loving of our family, become more understanding of people around us, try to understand people around us, and work out, we may achieve some kind of change. But if we just make the change, all we do is what we've been doing for the past few thousand years, been substituting generally one tyranny for another. I mean, you can say this tyranny is better than that tyranny, but it's still tyranny. To break it completely, you have to genuinely believe in understanding the other person's existence, accepting another person's existence, another person's point of view, the other person's right to express themselves and so on. And I think, you know, if you follow a very tight patriarchal, rigid, you know, community life, that's going to reflect it ultimately at the top.
Andrew Saris could very well be talking about Arsalan Sassani's Bamboo Fence, which is, in spite of its surface value as a children's film, also a film about repression. The central character of this featurette is a small boy who separates a puppy from its mother and then, against his father's wish, desperately tries to keep the puppy.
I think the message in Bamboo Fence, hidden under everything, is that we Iranians are constantly confined. We confine ourselves. The bamboo fences that one sees so frequently. I don't think the message is saying that somebody else is confining us. I think it's saying that deep within us, we confine ourselves. And the father, who is so strong and appears to Western eyes to be so brutal to the child, slapping the child and taking the child's dog away. I know that a dog means something different in Iran from what it does in the United States, but you know, to my eyes, he's a very brutal father. I think the message there, intended or not, says Iran wants strong leaders, in this case a father. Iran wants strong father figures, and Iran has always had strong father figures.
Dr. Louis Forsdale visited Iran twice in the 70s and was fascinated by the indigenous cinema he discovered there.
The quality of the films, their beauty, the photography was simply superb. Everything about them was something that was totally unexpected to me. A good example is the Bamboo Fence. A short film, the story of a young boy who's forever, you know, within boundaries, within fences that he can't seem to break loose from, dominated by a father who appears to a Western eye to be extremely harsh. You know, my heart goes out to the little kid.
The man is surrounded by his own problems. His problem is, it's much bigger. That, for instance, the problem why the son doesn't go to school. No, you see, the man the time that he punishes the boy, you see the man, he spread the net, on the surface of the sea, but he doesn't get anything. He doesn't get anything. And he's so frustrated. And meanwhile, he's informed that his son didn't attend school. No, he's not mad because why his son didn't attend school. He's mad because he doesn't have anything to live with. The way of raising a child in a country like Iran, or better to say, a third world country, is absolutely different. That's because of poverty. It's because of the simplest thing that you should have in your life, but you don't have it. I remember my father used to hit me by hammer.
By what?
Hammer.
Hammer?
Yeah, hammer. Yeah. Or just, that was because my father has the same problem that this man has.
The Bamboo Fence, I think, is one of the loveliest short films I have ever seen, with the message so deeply embedded in the film that it doesn't slap you in the face, with a story that's so touching and so moving. I compare it with Lamarice's Red Balloon, and that is very high tribute indeed, because among short films, I think of the Red Balloon being almost without flaw.
If Bamboo Fence represents the best of short Iranian films, Religions in Iran by Manucher Tayyip represents the best of Iranian documentaries. Religions in Iran compares and at times contrasts the religious rituals of 4 of the state-sanctioned religions in Iran under the Shah: Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism.
I think regardless to the title of the film, I had really no intention to make a film about religions in particular. I tried to make films about human beings and vis-a-vis their religions, something important to their lives. Maybe through religions they try to get some answer to their questions. I really didn't want to make a documentary about different religious groups or sects. There were many other sects and religious groups that I never referred to them because, as I told, the main goal was human being and not the religion. That's why I never mentioned which religion is which. such self-annihilation rituals exist in all religions. Sure, at this moment it seems a little bit violent, but it has nothing to do with a bunch of violent people that are praying. I never divided the religions. That's why I make cuts from one religion to other. And I wanted to make a unity in this film, because I believe if there is a God, is the one and only God, and there is no difference. And that's why I simply show people looking for something, trying to get closer to what they want. Sure, I wanted to show the violence, but not violence in a particular religion. It's the expression of human being. We can't control them. I mean, we can set a guideline how they have to pray.
What makes religions in Iran aesthetically distinct is a constantly moving camera that always seems to be trying to reach out for something. In effect, the camera itself turns into a pilgrim in a shrine.
My camera is a part of me, and if I see the scenes, I have to reflect my ideas through my camera.
Tayyip also carefully uses distancing techniques to keep his audience from being emotionally involved. He effectively intercuts long-moving shots of empty, sacred places with the same places packed with people in order to maintain an objective sense of separation of figure from ground.
I didn't want to get involved with emotionally involved with the whole action. I kept my camera sometimes in a distance. Sometimes I got closer, and sometimes I used a subjective camera, which means me and my camera was a part of this crowd. I used all these empty places to give my audience an opportunity to think and not getting emotionally involved all the time, because he had to make his own decision. You know, that's why I used these very slow camera movements in empty places like churches and mosques. That's the point. I really wanted to give him an opportunity to think.
The artistic flowering of Iranian cinema in the 70s was partly the result of a symbiotic type of relationship between the government and the quality filmmakers. The films, in their symbolic ways, were highly critical of the establishment, yet the filmmakers had to turn to the same establishment for financial support because their projects had little commercial appeal to attract any private investors. On the other hand, the government, while basically suspicious of the filmmakers and their intentions, found itself benefiting from being associated with them. The films were receiving tremendously favorable responses in international festivals, and the Shah's government was actively campaigning to counterbalance its debased political image abroad with as much cultural prestige as they could gain. The relationship, however, did not always work. Manicher Tayyip made his film for the Ministry of Art and Culture, one of the filmmaking branches of the government. But ironically, the ministry refused to issue a screening permit for the film.
As far as I know, this film has never been released for a public screening in Iran because of the controversy between the religious leaders at that time. They didn't actually like the way I made this film. Government people, I think they didn't have any specific idea. But they referred all the time, when they got such a film as a subject, they referred to the people that were in charge or were interested, you know. And then they made their decision. But I think, I mean, if they didn't release this film, which means to me that they really didn't want to show the film for public. And I asked them why they don't screen this film, I mean, publicly. They told me it's actually impossible to do it.
The Iranian Association of Physicians objected to this film because it was directly critical of the medical profession.
Well, yes, the reason that it was banned was because, I mean, it showed, you know, this kind of a poverty and everything. It was like the thing that, for instance, Dr. Erbal told me. He said that the way you showed this film was that you have a very beautiful restaurant, for instance, in appearance, very good, but you just don't show the restaurant. You go into the kitchen, and you show the dirty kitchen and all these, you know, cooks who are doing dirty works and so on. No, your film is like that. It does not. The things that I showed in the film was actually came from the reality, and even the locations that I used were the original locations.
The Psycho is very overt in its protest. It happens to protest blood exchanges which become contaminated and patients die and there are payoffs involved and that sort of thing. It's a very bitter, very direct film.
Hossein Saedi, the well-respected Iranian playwright, what attracted you to his work?
Well, first of all, I thought that he was the best dramatic writer, the best short story writer, the best, and his stories attracted me. They had somehow those elements which I always cherished in, you know, in works of good literature. That is to say, different layers, different dimensions of meaning, of attitude, of human relationship, and particularly this mysterious, symbolic, or one could say mystical element which exists in some of his works, that he somehow transcends, you know, the given reality, and he somehow talks about certain elements which are surreal.
If there was one thing which perhaps stands out about those Iranian films that I've seen in terms of a common kind of subject matter and theme, it is, curiously, the apparent absence of the government, in a way.
It's probably a wish thing of a great many intellectuals that the government would disappear and that the people would emerge, would somehow follow their own instincts. There's a kind of low-key, anarchic spirit, I think, there. And I think they've moved into areas where they don't have to deal with the president. I think the absence of the government in films from a very repressive society indicate a desire possibly to escape from that.
And instead what you have are people who apparently are sort of living without any external authority in their lives, which I imagine is kind of omitted because it'd be almost impossible to treat, but who on an individual basis seem to be cutting each other up.
The impression is that as long as criticism of the government remained on a symbolic level and not on a direct level, then a film would probably be allowed to be shown.
Not necessarily. Even when the films resorted to symbolic communication, they could still run into problems with the government. Witness Farmanara's Tall Shadows of the Wind.
The objection of the Shah's regime was that by a scarecrow, we meant Shah and his secret service. Another group of censors in the Khomeini regime, they said by the scarecrow, you mean Khomeini and his regime. I told them that this film was made prior to your regime, so we couldn't mean that.
In Iran, political relationships for centuries have had an extraordinarily unique quality. The ruling authorities have always tried to legitimize themselves by reference to some cultural or historical or moral system which is over and above everyday life. During the Shah's regime, the Shah tried to associate his regime with the pre-Islamic empires and with the institution of the monarchy down through history, and staged a number of symbolic celebrations in order to emphasize this. Under the regime of the Ayatollah Khomeini, we have reference to the legitimacy of Islam as a system. The interesting thing about pre-revolutionary and post-revolutionary Iran is that the hierarchical structure of the society has remained unchanged. It's difficult to criticize that authority without negating your acceptance of that basic relationship. And therefore, if you have grievances or you're unhappy about something or you want to express a protest, you have only two choices. One is to break the relationship and end up with something like a revolt or a revolution, or you can express your dissatisfaction in indirect ways. And the cinema turns out to be an important indirect way of expressing dissatisfaction with the current state of the moral universe in which individuals are involved.
They start with what they don't want you to have in your films. At the time of the Shah, you couldn't talk about the royal family, you couldn't talk about Islam, you couldn't talk about armed forces, and you couldn't talk about constitution. These were the four things that they said that you should not have in your films.
There were certain things which were taboo that you shouldn't touch, like for instance the critique of regime or the critique of Shah or critique of the ministers or the critique of whatever critique was completely taboo.
But once they were settled and became more powerful, they started telling you in the last couple of years what should be in your film. They said, we don't have a bad doctor, all doctors are good, so you should have a good doctor. And that's the end of creativity for anyone.
The ideal or the desire or the outlook of one or two or three particular person determines, you know, the destiny or the destiny of the film, you know.
I remember once with a friend of mine, we went to see a prime minister because we set up that new film group, an organization for young filmmakers. We wanted to get some loan from government to make it, and we decided to make films independently without helping of the conventional market and commercial producers. And he directly told us that if you want money from us, you must make film for us, and the way we say it. But if you want make films for your ideas, you have to invest yourself, spend your father's money or your property.
They controlled everything, even sometimes by investing money, they controlled filmmaking in Iran.
To an extent, they had become clever enough to use us as sort of safety valve. Let us do a political film and show it in Tehran and some festivals, and that was it. And the moment I realized that we were being used as a weapon to keep something safe for themselves, I stopped doing it that way, and I just started doing it, becoming more and more independent. But it was always antagonistic kind of relationship because they were censors, they were controlling all the valves, and I just, as an artist, I did not think that they should be doing that.
The relationship between Iranian filmmakers and the Iranian government was a highly ambiguous relationship. And I think what it really shows more than anything is that the Iranian government itself was not monolithic. On the one hand, we had certain areas of government that were not interested in having political expression be especially free or direct. Certainly were not interested in supporting anything which would turn back on government and promote criticism. And yet, on the other hand, we had other areas of government which were interested in fostering artistic expression.
Sure, they helped. I mean, if you are talking about restrictions, if you are talking about control, it doesn't mean that they had the whole nation in their hands. They had to. They had to do something for the country and for the culture of the country. And sometimes they use all these things as a propagandistic, to show themselves.
It is a matter of pride oftentimes for governments to support some kind of indigenous cinema.
Iran, I think, did that beautifully, at least in the period that I know about, where much of the funding for films came from government sources. Interestingly, many of the films that were made under government funding had within them buried, covert, what I would read as subversive messages. But I guess the government censors weren't reading in the same way that I was reading, because they were being financed by the government and shown by the government.
Very often you have films that seem to be politically daring, courageous, and then you analyze the situation, you find either they are what Carlos Fuentes said is a margin of dissent, you know, like 10%, like the government will tolerate this kind of, every regime, even the most repressive regimes will tolerate a certain amount of dissent, a certain amount of, in film anyway, a certain amount of criticism. Or else they're films made in exile, so to speak, or underground. Underground films are very hard to make. It's very hard to have the cinematic equivalent of Samit Satz. So I think political filmmaker, the filmmaker who wishes to say something political, although you can say, I would say that every film is political, no matter how vacuous or anything. If it says nothing, that is a political statement. That means that we're not going to say anything. So everything is political. I would say that the political filmmaker has to walk a tightrope, and I think we have to analyze the nature of that tightrope.
We come back to the question of censorship and the political regime, that only indirect statements can be made anyway, and therefore that, I suspect, tended to force an additional recourse to symbolic communication.
Under a totalitarian regime, usually, it happens because you haven't the opportunity to talk directly, and you try to find some way to express yourself. And this symbolism is actually the best way.
Somehow, in Iranian artistic tradition, things don't have much value aesthetically unless they're said in a highly indirect way. There's something about the artistic tradition in Iran which makes it necessary for the person who is approaching some artistic form to do some work himself in order to be able to discern the meaning.
What's interesting is the level of irony which a filmmaker can operate in, the level of allegory. One interesting thing is in Spain, the Spanish filmmakers during the Franco regime developed, including Buñuel, Viridiana, developed a very elaborate allegorical, symbolic subtext, I guess like science fiction writers did in America during the McCarthy era, that, you know, one thing represented another. And so you had this very elaborate subterfuge. And now some of that generation of filmmakers cannot compose it any other way.
The worst thing that could happen under such circumstances is the auto-censorship, which happens usually in countries and societies ruled by totalitarian governments. I mean, the effect is much greater than to control, I mean, to have a system who controls.
In many cases, I don't think that was necessary to make such heavy films. I mean, by having such a heavy language. And the nature of making film, I guess, it's making film for people. If you make a distance between yourself and people, why should you make any film?
Most of the films I have seen from Iran, and I'm sure I haven't seen all of them. In foreign countries, we tend to see the film more of the intelligentsia. We tend to see rather than the films that are more in the commercial mainstream. So we tend to get a somewhat distorted view of what a cinema is. But the films that are exported usually, particularly to festivals, to elite groups, to art house groups, to universities, to academic centers, tend to present a problem of the intellectual filmmaker trying to communicate with a larger audience from which he is somewhat alienated, somewhat separated.
The number of people who actually view these films was rather small. However, for these individuals, the fact that that political messages and messages of protest could be expressed even in a veiled way, even in an indirect way, was had a very powerful effect on those individuals.
What's interesting to me is obviously the gap between the people who are making the films and the society they're describing. It's an enormous gap. It's like centuries. And it's a strange situation.
If you're making a movie in a society, in a country, first you have to know your people, what kind of people, you know, are living in your country.
Here you have people who are, you know, flying in jets, making films about people who are going in ox carts. It's like centuries different. It's almost like archaeology, history. It's like going so far back, so far down, that the distance is just staggering. That's what I find interesting about them. How do you cope with that? And yet they're your people, they're your roots, your country, your blood. It's a hard question.
The Iranian Revolution in 1978 and 79 was largely engineered by people in the middle classes. And I have no doubt in my mind that the Iranian cinema in the 10 years previous to this contributed to the political awareness of people in the middle classes and educated classes, and particularly university students who formed an important aspect of political life in Iran in the late 70s.
The Iranian Revolution that replaced the monarchy of the Shah with the malacracy of Ayatollah Khomeini brought an end to a budding national cinema that had taken firm root despite the censorship and repression of the Shah's government. Although the revolution had initially brought them a promise of freedom, most Iranian filmmakers soon realized that they were clearly at odds with leaders of the new regime. Facing the dilemma of either submitting to the regime or maintaining their integrity, several talented Iranian filmmakers were forced to leave the country.
When the revolution happened, for a very short period of time, which is about 4 and 5 months immediately after the revolution, Iran was heaven on this earth because it was absolute freedom for an artist. I could do anything that I wanted. In fact, I had a script which was called The Day That the Shah Left. And all the preparation was there to start the shooting of the film. But all of a sudden, I saw that the signs of another dictatorship is starting. They started closing down the newspapers. They started having another group that going over this film scripts, and now much more harder than it was before. And by some very strange, I mean, it was this very strange feeling that now that I had experienced that beautiful 5 months, the repression again was so stifling as an artist that I just could not stand it.
Why did you leave the country?
Well, because I lost my job. I couldn't make any film. I couldn't open my theater. So why should I be there? But anyway, if I would be there, I had to do something because people, I was working with them for a long time, they expected me to work. Even my silence would have some meaning, that the government wouldn't like it.
Me, I have never been directly in Iran. I have spent my time, most of my time in Europe. I went to Iran, made my film, and went to Europe.
I'm still in exile. I haven't seen any changes.
For an Asian artist, it's the very, very difficult thing to immigrate because you're transplanting yourself to a totally new society, and the chances of a 38-year-old tree to be transplanted to a new soil and not dying with our background and culture is very, very remote. So it's not an easy decision, but a decision that I had to make because I also have 3 children. And I didn't want them to be brought up under the same kind of repressive regime, and they didn't want to come to this world, and I owe them at least a better life. And this is why I left.
I wanted to go back. I have the intention to go back. But then I couldn't, you know, make myself to go back to a country that it's hard to live for people like us.
Arsalan Sassani's life in exile has not been easy either. He has been earning a living by driving a cab in New York City.
What I am doing here, maybe it's not only because of myself, you know, because I feel I have kind of responsibility to my child, that I still believe that he can have a better life here than if he go back in Iran.
Parviz Sayed's life in exile was not very different from Arsalan Sassani's in the beginning. For 3 years he worked as a receptionist at a Columbia University-owned building in Manhattan. Then he managed to obtain funds to make The Mission, the first Iranian film to be made outside of Iran after the revolution. The film turned out to be a critical success, and subsequently Sayed moved to Los Angeles, where he now directs stage plays for the Iranian community.
من به تو حق میدم. گوش بده. شما من حقت برو پی کارو میگم. آقا جان، من از اینکه اشتیاق دارم به اختار میخورم. من از شما معذرت میخوام. لازم نکنه شما از من معذرت بخواید. ما اصلا چه مناسبتی با هم داریم؟ ما دو قطب مخالفم. میفهمی مخالفم. من چه مخالفتی با تو دارم؟ مخالفتم باشم خب به عقیده تو احترام میذارم. اونم همینطوره. من نمیدونم امشب چش بود. هیچ وقت تا بار اینطوری ندیده بودمش. من میدونم چش بود. من خوب میدونم اینجور آدم‌ها کجاشون میسوزه. آدمی که یه عمر راه خطا رفته مشکل به سرات مستقیم برگرده. همه این جیغ‌ها تو سوزی مال اینه که گفتن رقاصی موقوف، قرتی بازی، عرق خوری، سجود کثافتکاری دیگه موقوف. گفتن نوکر خارجی نباید بود. گفتن خیانت نباید کرد. خودت هم که الان بدتر از اون شدی. این حرفا چیه میزنی؟ این حرفا چیه میزنن؟ به ذائقه شما هم بد میاد. آقای سرهنگ فراری ساواک. ما مخلص شما هستیم. کجا؟ مگه به نگفتم جلو نیا. بایستا جاد.
How has been your life in exile?
Miserable. Yes, sometimes it's painful, but when you realize the reality and the way that it is, so you just you give up.
Marva Nabili, whose film The Sealed Soil was never shown in Iran, made The Night Songs, her first feature film in this country.
You see, you're building up too late. This is too late. You're seeing someone dying. Your immediate reaction is to get people away from it, okay? Action!
Action!
The film that was financed by PBS's American Playhouse is the story of a Vietnamese girl who experiences an identity crisis in New York's Chinatown.
Maybe eventually the exile thing disappears. The artist ceases to be in exile, becomes hyphenated, becomes part of it begins to operate away from a subculture, moves into the mainstream culture. I don't know. I don't know what I would say. I think he has to use his own instincts. It's very difficult to survive. He has my sympathy. I think, you know, for me, if I were to suddenly find myself in another country, forced to be in another country with a different language, with people who don't have my... I don't know how I'd function. I don't know what I would do. I mean, I think it's a nightmare situation.
We do a teacher training, a yoga training in India every January. I just got back from it.
Yeah, I saw it on your Instagram.
It's great. It's super fun. We have 3 academies. We have a music school where we study Indian music in kirtan. We have a 300-hour training for people who are already teachers, and we have a sacred literature. So you study the Bhagavad Gita and all these sacred texts.
We were talking about that before the podcast. I really wanted to get into that eventually. I just didn't know how to, like, the mystical aspects of the Bhagavad Gita and of the Mahabharata, all the ancient Indian texts, which are filled with really wild, out there shit. You know, I mean,
it's all real. All that crazy stuff is real.
In what way? Like,
just like all the things that you say, like, well, that's interesting. Oh, that's fascinating. That's fantastic. The more you get into it, you realize that's freaking real, man.
Like what? Like what's real?
Everything from like
the Vimanas,
things like that. I can't say are real, but I could understand how things can be made of subtle energy.
Well, explain Vimanas to people.
Vimana is like a spaceship.
Yes.
It's a spaceship and they speak of spaceships and flying crafts, but they're not made of the same elements of this earth.
Right.
So we have all these things about, you know, and I get it. There's a bunch of people making up shit about I saw an alien, etc. But there's also very qualified people, you know, Air Force colonels and things like that.
I've had them in here.
You've had them in? Yeah. They said, what kind of, and they suffer from the same thing. These people who claim abduction, it's not like a type of neurosis or schizophrenia. They suffer from like post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yes.
Like something happened, they disappeared, they were found 2 weeks later.
Do you remember the story of Betty and Barney Hill?
No.
It's the most famous abduction story. It was an interracial couple from, I think it was the 1950s or the 1960s. And just randomly.
My interviews always go here.
I had this girl on the podcast, this woman on the podcast yesterday. She's an MMA fighter. Her name is Angela Hill. She's a couple days ago, actually. This badass MMA fighter. And at the end of the podcast, she goes, I forgot to bring this up. My grandfather is Barney Hill. I was like, that guy. I'm like, no fucking way. That guy, Barney Hill, was the very first, like, really public UFO abductee. And there's and he describes his craft that's eerily similar to the crafts that Bob Lazar has described and different people described. And he and his wife lost time while they were driving and then woke up with these bizarre, horrific memories that they both shared of this encounter with these space beings, and that they were abducted and they were medical examinations were run on them, and then they were replaced with missing time. And it's crazy if you listen to the recordings of him being hypnotized and going through it, like screaming in fear that they're touching him and where are they taking him, what are they doing to him. It's not like a guy acting. It's not like a scene in a movie where someone's screaming in fear. It sounds real. And
the teachings of ancient India is that life exists on all planets. It even exists on the sun. And so the first argument, we're like, come on, how are we going to exist? They just don't have bodies that are different than yours, that have a fire body. And therefore, I'm trying to look at how does a person with earth and water body live in the sun? They can't.
Right.
You have to have a body. I mean, I used to think like this when I was 13 years old.
Right.
I used to think like, okay, why can my dog hear those sounds, but I can't hear them?
Right.
What am I missing? What sense am I missing that I can't have objective reality?
Yeah.
You know, what am I missing? Am I missing a sense?
Well, I have this principle called the fart theory. Like if someone farted but you didn't have a nose, you'd have no idea.
You'd have no idea?
You have no idea. You'd be like, oh, God, what is that?
That fart theory is the beginning of transcendental thought.
Yeah, because there's a sense that you possess that allows you to
access.
Recognize something that's invisible. You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't hold it. There's no way of detecting it other than your olfactory senses. But through your nose, you can detect that something's awful.
What sense am I missing that's keeping me from understanding absolute reality?
Sure. I mean, that's one of the things that you feel when you take psychedelics. Like, is this opening up some new sense that is this around me all the time? I'm just not tuned into it because I don't have the right chemical composition flowing through my brain?
When I start to teach a bigger training, like a yoga training and philosophy, that's one of the things I do mainly. I start with this concept of this is how you understand. Like when I first approached teachers when I went to India, I would say things like, I'm reading this Mahabharata. I think it's a great book, a lot of great lessons here. But come on, we're adults. Am I supposed to understand that a elephant-headed man scribed this entire book? Can't we just extract a useful lesson? And the answer was very good that I got was, and it was very sweet. It wasn't like cruel. He just said, what do you know? It sort of like caught me off guard. Like, what do you actually know?
Right. What do you know?
And he used this example from New York. Okay. Suppose 300 years ago you're living in New York, your family's living in New York, your tribe is living in New York, you have a certain amount of animals and animals that you keep, animals that you ride, animals that you hunt, foods you eat, and then one of you goes on a boat to Africa. And you come back and you think, you're never going to believe what I saw. I saw a striped horse. You're thinking, well, I've seen striped horses. White head, black neck. No. I saw a striped horse. If you've never seen a zebra, it's almost unbelievable if all you know is ponies.
Right.
Or I saw this horse with a really long neck that ate the leaves on the trees. Come on, man. It's all fantastic because we've never seen it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't. So to really understand the Vedas, the teachings of ancient India, you have to go into it like, not that it's all real. I'm not saying to just blind faith, but I'm not saying don't be a blind doubter. Like it's all unreal. That's bullshit. That's crazy. That's nuts. It's got to be, could be. I don't know, but I don't know a lot.
What do you think what do you think like Ganesh was?
Ganesh's a being.
The Bible's account of the Hebrew exodus out of Egypt is one of the most popular narratives from the ancient world. Today, all over the world, there are millions who by faith declare their trust in the Bible's account. In fact, over 50% of the population of Earth follows a religion that believes that the Exodus is a historical fact. Over the years, many theories have been presented concerning the Exodus account, and now we are about to fly to Egypt to test these ideas and search for the evidence. We will send our research back to you, and we ask that you will consider it carefully. Yours sincerely, Paul and Matthew. For almost 2,000 years, the civilization of ancient Egypt was lost, forgotten in history. The great pharaohs who had made the ancient world tremble were forgotten, hidden, buried deep beneath the sands. Their temples were in ruins, their palaces destroyed, and their legacy was trampled on. Ancient Egypt, its customs, culture, and military might were forgotten, all apart from one most amazing source: the Bible. The Bible's description of ancient Egypt is overwhelming. Referenced in hundreds of places, the scriptures kept alive an intelligent account of life in this land. It is very clear from the evidence that the people who wrote the Bible had intimate knowledge of life in ancient Egypt. The legacy that they kept alive, only now can we truly reclaim. In this land, the search for the past is never over, and our quest would begin in the ancient tombs, looking for Joseph and the Hebrew slaves. But before we could begin to enter these tombs and temples, we headed to the pyramids of Giza to consider the date of the Exodus and the timeline for our investigation. Our first consideration before entering the tombs and temples of the pharaohs was to find the timeline for the Exodus account. And in this search, the genealogies and dates from the Bible became invaluable to give us a timeline from which we could work. 1 Kings 6:1 states that Solomon began building the Jewish temple in the 4th year of his reign, which was 480 years after the Exodus took place. Based on the data available, most biblical scholars agree that the 4th year of Solomon's reign was 966 BC. Using this information, we can calculate the date of the Exodus. 966 BC is the 4th year of Solomon's reign. Add to that 480 years since the Exodus, and it equals 1446 BC. The Bible, therefore, if we understand it correctly, gives us a date of 1446 BC for the Exodus. To test this timeline, we also compared it with evidence that has been discovered from other civilizations of the age. The Exodus date, according to the biblical timeline, is 1446 BC. We know from the Bible that Moses was 80 years old at the time of the Exodus. Therefore, working back using the genealogies and dates given to us from the Bible, we can discern the dates for Moses, Joseph, and other biblical characters. Now that we had a timeline available, we felt ready to study Egyptian history, knowing now from what era to begin our research. Finally, by comparing the biblical timeline with the Egyptian timeline, we could learn how and where the Bible's account and Egyptian history fitted together. The first thing we confirmed was that these pyramids were built hundreds of years before the time of Joseph. Therefore, the Hebrew slaves did not build these pyramids. The story of the life of Joseph has been an inspiration to millions, but where is the evidence? After carefully researching the Bible's account, we now believe that many artifacts and items have already been found that act as a confirmation of biblical events. However, we believe that many of these very important items have been forgotten and overshadowed by the great discoveries of ancient Egypt. According to the Bible, Joseph was a dreamer who lived in the land of Canaan. One day he was sent out by his father to find his brothers who were feeding their flocks, and because of their envy towards him, they threw him into a pit and sold him as a slave. He was then taken to Egypt, where he became a household slave of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. Perhaps one of the most interesting pieces of the puzzle concerning the rise of Joseph to power is the exact detail that the Bible gives us concerning the process of becoming Prime Minister. Joseph is given the symbol of authority in Egypt. He receives a ring, the royal seal. He is given garments of fine linen, and a gold chain is placed around his neck. In Egypt, this exact process can be found in Egyptian reliefs, just as this computer animation of one of these reliefs shows. As Prime Minister of Egypt, Joseph prepared the nation for 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Today we know that ancient Egypt was one of the very few peoples on earth at that time who had the administrative ability to do such a thing, and the ruins of such storehouses can be found in Egypt. Also, we know that Egypt did suffer from famines, and there is a famous text called the Tradition of the 7 lean years in Egypt. In the text, Pharaoh says, "My heart is heavy over the failure of the Nile floods for the past 7 years. There is a shortage of food. The court does not know what to do. The storehouses have been opened, but everything that was in them has been consumed." We have come thousands of miles, and now we are about to see what some believe to be the family of Joseph arriving in Egypt. The scene in front of us indicates a migration of Semitic people into Egypt. Women, children, animals and men walking with weapons as the Bible describes. These Semitic people are clearly different from the depictions of Egyptians all around them. These depictions date to the time of Joseph, and those characterized are wearing multicolored coats. The Bible says that when Joseph invited his family to live in Egypt, that he gave them all new clothes. Could it be that the very thing that had divided them when Joseph was young, the multicolored coat, was now a symbol of a gift that was bringing them back together? The story of Joseph's life ends with his family reunited and living in Egypt. And the text tells us that when he died, he was mummified and buried in a tomb, just as Egyptian culture would require for a man of such distinguished experience. We're like going out into the desert, and there's a load of different tombs around. We've started our search for the Hebrew slaves, and we're looking for clues to lead us in the right direction. You've got this just massive valley nobody is visiting. It's like coming to Egypt 200 years ago. This tomb they found 3 mummies. So we're going to a small temple. Inside is a 3,500-year-old inscription of hatred towards a Semitic people group by Pharaoh Hatshepsut. It says, "I have restored that which was ruined. I have raised up that which was gone to pieces, since the Asiatics were in the midst of Avaris of the north, and vagabonds were in the midst of them." Who were these Asiatics and vagabonds? We know from the Bible that Semitic people were often considered as an abomination to Egyptians. So is this them? From our research, we discovered that the Hyksos were a very large Semitic people group who lived in Egypt. Some of them became rulers in Egypt, and they were expelled in a mass exodus. Our search is getting very interesting. Yours sincerely, Paul and Matthew.
This is the area which biblically is known as the land of Goshen.
Excavations revealed that Avaris was a huge city, and the foundations of many structures have been found. The Semitic people who lived here became powerful, and their leader ruled vast areas of land. And to the amazement of many, several royal seals were also found here, bearing a name from the Bible: Jacob. But finally, these Semitic people were hated by the Egyptians and were forced to leave the country in one mass exodus.
These were a Semitic people group who ruled the north of Egypt. Josephus, the great first century historian, made the link between the Hyksos people, the foreign rulers, and the people of Israel. Some people have said, we have Semitic people, we have the name Jacob, we have rulers, and we have an expulsion or an exodus. Is this actually the evidence for the Hebrews? There is evidence for Semitic people at the time of Joseph, all the way to the time of the Exodus.
Some people believe that the Hyksos are the Hebrew slaves, stating all the similarities and noting that after they left Egypt, they disappeared from history. Whilst others think that the Hebrews lived amongst the Hyksos, and it was their departure that explains the beginning of the fierce persecution of the Hebrews by the Egyptians.
And also, they've wondered, some have considered that they may have even dug up the tomb of Joseph very near this area.
In another section of this area, they found the evidence that showed that Asiatic people lived in the Bible's land of Goshen long before the Hyksos period. And excavations reveal a large house which is very similar to designs later found in Israel, and they found a tomb. Inside the tomb was the head of a broken statue of a Semitic leader who had made it into high Egyptian office. He was painted with coloured hair and his coat was multicolored. Taking the information available, we recreated the statue head in our computer, and by studying the details left and comparing his broken features with that of other people from the time, we were able to begin an artist's impression of the restoration of the image of this man. Finally, by comparing the technical details of the statue we began to restore what this man may have looked like to his contemporaries. Over 3,500 years ago, this Semitic man became powerful in the Bible's land of Goshen. Could he be, as some believe, Joseph? In the land of Goshen, we have found that there is huge amounts of evidence for Semitic people living in the land, just as the Bible suggests. And now our journey continues as we search for a depiction of the Hebrew slaves themselves. Our aim was to find the key to understand how the chief artist of this tomb portrayed Semitic people. This artist gave Egyptians thick, dark hair with coloured skin, but there were other people with lighter skin tones, as well as Africans in traditional clothes. It was then that we got our breakthrough. We found a depiction of some Semitic people paying tribute. These visitors from Syria gave us the clue that we were looking for. Now we knew that this artist drew Semitic people with lighter skin tones and with cropped light hair. As we looked again, we saw Egyptians. Then, mirroring the Bible, we found a man making bricks with very short hair. Carrying water was another man, and there was another with similar features. Finally, we saw a tall Egyptian overseeing the work, and the text says, "The rod is in my hand, be not idle." In the Bible, the children of Israel are beaten for not fulfilling their quotas, and they are told, "You are idle."
Part of the brick walls of the temple, very much compressed dirt. They found the cartouche stamped onto them. So basically his seal, he ordered it, he paid for it, etc. Thus dating it to this time period.
For around 2,000 years, Ramesses II has been called the Pharaoh of the Exodus. However, we've been researching the mystery of the Exodus, and we have a suspicion that something is wrong with identifying Ramesses II as the Exodus Pharaoh. Today, we will begin to enter the temples of Ramesses II, searching for the clues to uncover the truth. To learn more about Ramesses II. Ramesses II built 134 columns in this great hall. But who did the labour? These columns are the work of skilled men, but who did the manual labour? We know today that the Egyptians used mud brick to help build these structures, because some of these ramps were left behind, and the Bible specifically mentions that the Hebrews made mud bricks. So, is this the work of the Hebrews? However, the more we looked for the Hebrews in the reign of Ramesses, the less we could find. Yet we did learn more about the wars of Ramesses. Now the Hittites are mentioned on the wall just over here,
And this is Ramesses II treaty with the Hittites. This is it here.
The Bible says that the Hebrews built the supply cities of Pithom and Ramesses. For hundreds of years, poor Ramesses, the capital of Ramesses II, was identified as one of these biblical cities. However, the city itself vanished thousands of years ago. By the 20th century, almost all the great Egyptian cities had been found. But poor Ramesses was still lost, and its legend became epic. How did a great city, one of the most spectacular in the ancient world, and home to some 300,000 people, disappear without a trace? Yet some 3,000 years after it vanished from history, a French archaeologist believed that he had solved one of the ancient world's greatest mysteries. He claimed that he found the lost city of poor Ramesses. But things were not what they seemed, so we had to go there to investigate. When Egyptologists found this site, they became convinced that this was the lost city of poor Ramesses. Everywhere they found images of Ramesses II, and his royal stamp covered the site. They believed that the mystery of the lost city had now been solved. But as we walked around San El Hagar, it seemed like something was wrong. In every direction that we looked, we saw broken and mismatched pieces. Something was wrong, but what was it?
It's almost like looking at a big whirlwind that's come through and knocked everything to pieces and thrown it down.
For decades, Egyptologists believed that the famous capital of Ramesses II was found, but nagging doubts continued. Then reports came from Contir, south from here, suggesting that poor Ramesses was there. But how could the city be in two places at once? After decades of research, the answer was finally found. Here, on this very site, the city of poor Ramesses had truly been found. Ramesses' great city, his temples and statues were all found here. But this was not poor Ramesses. The archaeological world was stunned. This was the right city, but it was in the wrong place. Somehow, beyond imagination, an entire city had been moved miles, and no records of the move exist. One clue to understanding what happened was the discovery of the broken feet of a statue found many miles south from San El Hagar, and its other half appeared to be at this site. Finally, a team at Contir began digging, and they carried out a ground-penetrating survey looking for the city's foundations, and they found them. Now that we knew where the real poor Ramesses was, we had to go there. A 4th century pilgrim took the same route, so we studied her account. She said, "The city of Ramesses is now open country, without a single habitation, but it is certainly traceable, since it was great in circumference and contained many buildings." 1600 years later, we are following in her footsteps. Yours sincerely, Paul and Matthew.
Right now we're driving through the area which has been located as Ramesses.
We've been searching to find if Ramesses II is the pharaoh of the Exodus, but we haven't found any evidence to support this view. Also, if we take the biblical timeline literally, he would have lived around 200 years after the Exodus account. If this is the case, why then has he been identified as the pharaoh of the Exodus? As we searched history, we learned that people identified Ramesses II as the pharaoh of the Exodus based upon the Bible's use of the name Ramesses. But the name Ramesses was in use long before Ramesses II, and the Bible itself called the land of Goshen the land of Ramesses in the time of Joseph. This shows that the author of these passages in the Bible was identifying the ancient land in which the Hebrews lived with the modern name. In the book of Genesis, the Bible does the same thing, but at that time it gave both the old traditional name of the site and the new name. Therefore, instead of the Bible identifying Ramesses II as the pharaoh of the Exodus, it is simply using the modern name of the area to identify the land in which the Hebrews once lived. If this theory is correct, then there should be evidence for the presence of Semitic people in the area of Ramesses long before the time of Ramesses II. Then, when we compared notes and maps, we discovered one amazing thing. Ramesses was built in the exact same area where Avaris once stood. In fact, the large city of Ramesses was built on top of the ruins of the old city of Avaris. And Avaris is the spot where we've already found evidence for the presence of Semitic people. The first reference to ancient Israel in Egypt is found after the time of Ramesses II. This is one of the reasons why Ramesses II has often been identified as the pharaoh of the Exodus. But our research has shown that the Bible places the Exodus hundreds of years before Ramesses II lived. Therefore, we are heading south now in search for the evidence that will lead us to find the name of the man who refused to let God's people go, the real pharaoh of the Exodus. Yours sincerely, Paul and Matthew.
Well, at the presence we have our very own police escort in front and behind, armed guards.
Our search has taken us to ancient Thebes, but where do you go to look for the pharaoh of the Exodus? There was only one place to start.
We're at 2,000 feet now, over the Valley of the Kings.
The Valley of the Kings was the burial place for the pharaohs for hundreds of years, and somewhere down there, the pharaoh of the Exodus was buried. But who was he, and what will it take for us to find him? As we searched the biblical text, we found 10 clues hidden in the text. For us, these 10 clues represented the 10 conditions that must be met by any pharaoh to be considered as the biblical pharaoh. The 10 clues are as follows. He must come to power before the biblical date for Moses' return to Egypt. He must be preceded by a pharaoh known as a great oppressor. His firstborn son must have died and another succeeds him as pharaoh. Finally, there must be limited military action during his reign due to the losses at the Red Sea. Now, the search was on. Using the scriptures, scholars have been able to date the Exodus to the year 1446 BC. However, many secular scholars reject the Bible and its timeline, so very few look into this period of history for evidence of the Exodus. But we did. So once again, we compared the biblical timeline with the Egyptian timeline. And if both timelines are understood correctly, we expected to find two pharaohs occupying the biblical era. One would be the last pharaoh of the oppression, the other would be the Exodus pharaoh whom Moses confronted. Then, to our amazement, using Egyptian high chronology, two Egyptian pharaohs turned up in the right place at the right time. According to this comparison, Pharaoh Tutmosis III would have been the last pharaoh of the oppression, and Pharaoh Amenhotep II would be the Exodus pharaoh. So our quest was clear, to apply critical study and diagnosis to discover if Pharaoh Amenhotep II could meet the 10 conditions as found in the Bible to be considered as the Exodus pharaoh. Using Egyptian high chronology, Amenhotep II fits in perfectly with the biblical timeline as the Exodus pharaoh. So the first condition was met, but now we have to discover if his predecessor was a great oppressor. According to our timeline, Tutmosis III was pharaoh before him, so was he a great oppressor? The answer would be found at city list, and this is really brilliant because it shows a part of the situation that Canaan is in just before the people of Israel are going to go in there. It's actually during the time of Moses. All of these things here are the different cities that were captured. Each one represents a prince from each city. What happened is they all went to Megiddo, and at Megiddo, when the city fell, all of the princes fell into the hand of Tutmosis III. The Bible's depiction of Canaan before the Israelites went in is full of people. There are many kings, many princes. Each little city has its own prince. It's 134 princes altogether who Pharaoh Tutmosis III conquered, and we see the land of Canaan depleted and these people under his feet. According to our timeline, Pharaoh Tutmosis III was the last great pharaoh of the oppression, and the depictions in this temple prove that Tutmosis III is an ideal candidate for the pharaoh of the oppression. The second condition has now been met. Pharaoh Amenhotep II, according to our timeline, is the Exodus pharaoh, but we found 10 Exodus Pharaoh. One by one, the evidence mounted as artifacts on the ground confirmed that he met condition after condition. Pharaoh Amenhotep II met every condition apart from one. The Bible says that the firstborn son of the Exodus Pharaoh died in the judgments. So did Amenhotep's firstborn son die, or did he live and reign? The successor is not the firstborn son. Amenhotep's successor was not his firstborn son. And as we compared the 10 conditions we found in the Bible, we realized that Amenhotep II met every one. Now there was only one task left. Pharaoh Amenhotep II has met all the conditions to be considered as the Exodus Pharaoh. And he is cross. We're pursuing the answers to these questions. Yours sincerely, Paul and Matthew. In the 20th century, for the first time in history, we could view Earth from a new perspective. And new American satellites were kept busy photographing key areas of interest, and Egypt was on the list. What these photographs revealed were classified for years. The parting of the Red Sea is central to the Exodus story, but no one has proved conclusively where their crossing took place. We know that the starting point for the Exodus was the area of Ramesses, and one traditional idea is that the Hebrews headed south and crossed the tip of the Red Sea. The problem, however, with this theory is the depth of the Red Sea. Even with an underwater ridge, the depth of any Red Sea crossing at any point is very great. The Bible specifically notes that the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind. Science has shown us that moving a body of water with the depths of the Red Sea with the power of the wind would cause wind speeds that were impossible to walk in. It would be like risking our lives in the worst hurricane we could imagine. However, it is possible to move a smaller body of water where travel would still be possible. But where in the Nile Delta is there a shallow body of water? In the Hebrew text, the body of water that the Hebrews crossed is literally called Yam Suf. This was translated as the Red Sea, but many believe its true meaning was always Sea of Reeds. The Sea of Reeds would refer to a lake where reeds were abundant, and some of these lakes can still be found. They are deep enough to drown in, but also they are shallow enough to be parted by a strong east wind. The Sea of Reeds interpretation of the Bible opens up new possibilities, but it also presents us with major problems. We can find lakes in the Nile Delta now, but the building of the Suez Canal reconfigured this area and dried up old lakes. Trying to find what this area would have looked like 3,500 years ago is unfortunately almost impossible. However, remember those NASA satellite photos and images? By studying NASA satellite photos and data from specialist image equipment, experts were able to find the imprint of the missing lakes to help us visualize the region during the time of Moses. And this data gives us 4 more options for the crossing: the Northern Lake, the El Bala Lake, Lake Timsha, or the Bitter Lake. The NASA satellite photos also reveal the outline of several old forts on the northern route, which the Bible calls the Way of the Philistines. According to scripture, God told Moses not to take this northern route, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war. The northern route that the Bible identifies has been found and was called the Way of Horses. from Mount Sinai. But was this route too direct and dangerous for a fleeing people? Did they really reach Mount Sinai along this route so quickly? The book of Exodus says, in the 3rd month after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, they came to the wilderness of Sinai, and Israel camped there before the mountain of Sinai. This route therefore seems to be too direct for the scriptural clues.